Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to Paranormal M, and tonight we have several strange stories to get into. Please turn on notifications so you don't miss future videos, and if you have a paranormal experience of your own, feel free to send it to me. We'll begin with a story about a man who found an old miner's lamp in his grandparents' shed in Bluefield, West Virginia. It looked like an ordinary antique, but after he lit it, strange things started happening that he couldn't ignore. Let's get started. Sleep well, everyone. I found it in my grandparents' shed, tucked away like it had been hiding from daylight for 80-some years. My wife and I were clearing the place out in Bluefield, West Virginia, just sorting through rusted tools, cracked jars, old feed sacks, the usual things you expect to find in a shed that's been left alone too long. Then, way back in the corner, behind a sagging stack of lumber, I found this wooden crate wrapped in brittle burlap. Inside was a brass carbide miner's lamp. It was heavy in my hand, dented, tarnished. The reflector was bent just a little, and the whole thing was stained black in places, like the dark had soaked into it and stayed there. It looked exactly like the lamps miners carried down into the hills in the 1930s and 40s. And folded underneath it was a letter from my great-grandmother, dated 1940. Nobody in my family had ever mentioned it. Nobody remembered the lamp. Nobody knew why it had been hidden away. I wish I had left it hidden. I cleaned it up that evening. Not perfectly, just enough to see the brass under all that grime. I bought fresh carbide, set it up, and lit it. That's when everything started. The letter said the lamp belonged to a man named Elias Huck Bennett. He was 38 years old, a foreman at Pond Creek No. 1, down in Bartley, McDowell County. He had a wife and 3 children, with another baby on the way. On January 10, 1940, at around 2:30 in the afternoon, the mine exploded. 91 men died. My great-grandmother wrote that the rescue crews worked for days, going nearly 600 feet down through poison air and ruin to bring the bodies out. When they found Elias, he was sitting upright against the coal wall, and his lamp was still burning beside him. That shouldn't have been possible. Not with the air gone bad. Not with the afterdamp. Not after all that time. But people around Bartley talked about it afterward. They called it Huck's lamp, the one that wouldn't go out. At the bottom of the letter, my great-grandmother had written one warning. Do not light it. The flame brings something back with it. I read that after I had already lit the lamp. The first night, I woke up at 3:17 in the morning, soaked through with sweat. I went downstairs, and there it was on the kitchen table, burning. I had blown it out before bed, I know I did. But the flame was sitting there, low and steady, almost careful, like someone had just turned the valve with a practiced hand. A few nights later, my wife woke me up coughing. She said she smelled coal dust, thick, dry, bitter coal dust. We don't live near an active mine. There is no reason that smell should have been in our house. But when I went downstairs, the lamp was burning again. That's when I moved it to the garage. And that's when things got worse. My truck, which had barely given me any trouble before, threw a rod out of nowhere. Tools disappeared and showed up in places I never put them. At night, we started hearing knocks in the walls. Not random settling sounds, measured knocks, like signals. Then our cat turned up dead under the house. There was black dust in her fur. Last week, I came home and found the garage door wide open. The lamp was sitting on the hood of my truck, burning so hard the flame looked almost white at the center. And on the garage wall, just beyond the reach of the light, I saw shadows. Men-shaped shadows. They looked like they were wearing coveralls and hard hats, standing shoulder to shoulder in the dark, waiting for someone to call their names. My wife heard whispering that night. She swears it was a list of names and dates, Some of the names matched the ones from the Pond Creek disaster. I checked. That same night, I woke up at 3:17 again. The lamp was on my nightstand. I had left it locked in the garage. I don't know how it got there. For now, I've managed to keep it out. I put it in a metal box, packed the whole thing in salt, and locked it back in the shed. I haven't woken up at 3:17 for 3 nights now, but I can still feel it out there. That sounds ridiculous, I know. A lamp sitting in a box shouldn't feel like anything, but this one does. It feels awake, and I'm scared that salt is only slowing it down. I'm scared the flame didn't just bring something back. I'm scared it gave something away in. I want to tell you about someone I lost. I'm going to call him Elias. When I first met him, I had just started a new job. I was nervous, trying to figure out where I fit, and then he walked right up to me with this bright, easy smile and introduced himself like we had already been friends for years. After that, we were almost inseparable. We found every excuse to talk, every reason to stay a little longer. Honestly, we probably spent more time laughing than working. During the holidays, I would work my regular shift and then offer to stay late helping with overnight orders, mostly because it meant I got to keep spending time with him. By morning, we would go get coffee or breakfast, sometimes wander through stores afterward, even when neither of us needed anything. It felt like we were always trying to stretch the hours. I'd take him to this little bar I liked, where we'd play pool and talk about everything and nothing. We didn't hang out outside of work all the time, but when we did, it felt natural, safe. And the thing I remember most is that he made me smile more than anyone else did. Looking back, I don't think I realized how much he cared about me. I used to vent to him about other guys, completely missing what was right in front of me. I think about that now more than I probably should, because the truth is, I loved him too. Maybe not in the way I understood back then, but I did. I think I could have been happy with him, really happy. But there was always this strange feeling I couldn't get past. At the time, I didn't know what it meant. Now, part of me wonders if maybe I wasn't meant to understand it yet. At one point, I got involved with another coworker. It was a terrible idea, and it ended badly, just like those things usually do. He started spreading rumors about me, saying I was obsessed with him, saying I wouldn't leave him alone. Elias knew him too. They were friends. But Elias never believed any of it. Not once. He stood up for me. He defended me. And eventually, he cut that person out of his life completely. He told me the things being said were cruel, but he wouldn't repeat them. He said I didn't need to carry that. And he kept that part from me forever. After that, we got even closer. We talked every day. Then one day, he told me he had gotten a new job. I was the first person he told. I was proud of him, genuinely proud. But I remember feeling sad too, because I knew things were about to change. He loved that new job. He was doing well. He seemed happy. Then one night, a couple months later, he texted me late. He asked if I could meet him at the bar we used to go to. The second I read the message, I felt uneasy. Not scared exactly, but heavy. Like he needed me. So I rushed there after work. I drove as fast as I could. But by the time I got there, he was already gone. I couldn't reach him until the next morning. A couple weeks later, everything changed. I walked into work like it was a normal day, and the same coworker I hadn't spoken to since everything happened was standing near the entrance, waiting for me. That alone felt wrong. He told me I needed to go talk to the manager. At first, I thought I was in trouble. I thought maybe I was being fired. But then he followed me all the way to the office, and something in my stomach just dropped. When I sat down, my manager told me Elias had taken his own life. I didn't believe her. I kept telling her she was wrong. She had to say it more than once before the words even became real. And when they finally did, I broke. I made it to the lockers before I completely fell apart. I remember that coworker asking if I was okay, and I was so angry I could barely look at him. I even remember thinking Elias would have rolled his eyes at him too. I spent the rest of that shift trying to hold myself together. I couldn't understand it. He had seemed so happy. I couldn't stop thinking about that night at the bar. If I had gotten there sooner, if he had waited, if one tiny thing had gone differently. I carried those questions everywhere. Then I went to his celebration of life, and that's when the strange things started. I was standing with a group of coworkers when a tiny cardinal started chirping right behind my feet. It was nowhere near a nest. No one knew how it had gotten there. But I knew. I felt it immediately. It felt like Elias saying, "I'm here." Later, his mom had a reading done with a medium. Somehow, Elias gave her enough details about me that she was able to find me online, even though she didn't know who I was. She messaged me and told me he had a message. She said he heard me talking to him, and that he missed me too. She said he loved me, and that I shouldn't be sad forever, because I would find love like that again. Then she told me something I never forgot. She said if I ever sat quietly and really listened to the sounds around me, I might hear him answer. What she didn't know was that I had already been talking to him, out loud, in my room, in my car, telling him about my life like he was still there, just a little farther away than before. Around that time, I was not handling his death well. I was grieving him, and I was tired, and I finally said out loud, "I'm done with relationships." 3 days later, I met the person I'm still with now. We almost didn't meet at all. There were so many tiny things that had to happen exactly right. It felt impossible, like invisible threads had been quietly tying themselves together behind the curtain. 6 years later, we're still together. I'm happy, truly happy. And I've always believed Elias had something to do with that. After that, more things happened. A sock somehow ended up placed perfectly on one blade of my ceiling fan. A stuffed horse my grandfather had given me moved from my closet to the middle of my dad's room. Then I had a dream about Elias. But it didn't feel like a dream. It felt real. I saw him standing across the street, and I ran to him. I jumped into his arms and held him as tightly as I could. I was crying, asking him why he left. He just smiled at me. He told me he was okay. He told me he was happy. He told me there was nothing I could have done, that it had been his time, that I needed to stop blaming myself. Then he brushed the hair out of my face and told me everything was going to be okay. When I woke up, I was already crying, and I could still feel his hand on my face. Months later, I found out that what he said in that dream matched what he had written in the note he left for his family. I hadn't known that before. Then, that December, I got into a terrible car accident. The impact stopped my car completely. I hit my head against the driver's side window. Everything went black for a second, and then all I could hear was ringing. There was dust everywhere from the airbags. When the paramedics arrived, they kept looking past me at the car. They were talking about the damage, about how bad the impact was, about how it should have been worse. At first, they didn't even realize I had been the driver. When they finally checked me, everything was strangely normal. One of the paramedics just looked at me, completely stunned, and said he had never seen anything like it. Then he said, "You definitely had someone protecting you." And I knew exactly who. I walked away with a minor concussion and barely any neck pain. No cuts, no bruises, nothing that matched the wreckage around me. Months after that, I was in the car with my boyfriend. No music was playing. It was completely quiet. I was watching the road, listening to the stillness around me. And then I heard a man's voice say, "I love you." I answered without thinking, assuming it was my boyfriend. But he looked at me, confused. He hadn't said anything. After that, it kept happening. "Hey, hi." Always when it was quiet. Always when I was really listening. Then I remembered what his mom had told me. I went back and reread her message, and there it was. Exactly what Elias had said would happen. There were other signs too. Blue spots showing up in random pictures. His favorite flower growing in my mom's garden, even though she never planted it. Every time, I knew. It's been 6 years now. Life has gotten busier. I don't sit in silence as often as I used to. I don't always listen the way I did when the grief was still fresh. But sometimes, when the world gets quiet enough, I still feel it. That small, impossible feeling. And I'm not afraid of it. It feels like love. It feels like he never fully left. Like somewhere in the silence, Elias is still there, waiting to be heard. I picked astral projection because, honestly, there weren't many other labels that felt close enough. But I've had a few different kinds of strange paranormal dreams over the years. I originally came here because of some odd things happening at my workplace, but after reading other people's stories, I felt like maybe it was time to share something a little more personal. The first dream that really stayed with me happened when I was very young, maybe around first grade. In the dream, there were 2 little girls with dark brown hair. They were dressed almost exactly alike, in pale blue dresses with ruffles, little hair clips, white socks, and shiny black Mary Janes. They were sitting in this enormous hallway, almost like a corridor in a grand old building. Then, out of nowhere, this huge wave came rushing toward them. As a kid, my brain thought it looked like tomato soup or spaghetti sauce, something thick and red. It filled the whole hallway. But the strangest part was how calm the girls were. They didn't scream. They didn't run. They just lifted their feet a little, like they were letting water pass underneath their chairs. But the wave was massive. It swallowed the entire space. I remember waking up and telling my mom about it that morning while she was standing in the kitchen. She thought it was odd, but she didn't seem too concerned. Still, that dream never left me. Years later, I was up late with my roommate Mara, and we were talking about dreams. She had been listening to meditations and sleep hypnosis because she was trying to lucid dream. I told her about the hallway dream, and her face just changed. She asked me if I had ever seen The Shining. I hadn't. I grew up in a very strict environment where television and movies weren't really allowed, so I missed a lot of the popular films most people know. Mara pulled up a picture of the twins from the movie, and my stomach dropped. They looked almost exactly like the girls from my dream. I asked around later. I asked my sister if maybe we had seen it at a relative's house. She said no. I asked my uncle if my grandparents ever watched horror movies. He said absolutely not. So I still have no idea where that image came from, or why I dreamed it so clearly when I was that young. The second dream happened much more recently. In 2024, I changed careers and started working as a caregiver in home care. One of my first regular clients was an elderly man with a very unusual type of dementia. His daughter, Lena, also lived there. She had a reputation for being difficult with people, but for some reason, she and I got along really well. We had a lot in common, even a couple of mutual friends. After a few weeks, she started joking around and flirting a little. It was mostly harmless and playful at first. Nothing serious, though things did eventually get uncomfortable later on, and I had to ask to be reassigned. That's a whole different story. Anyway, at one point, Lena had to travel for work. Another caregiver was away too, so I ended up working a lot of long shifts at the house. Since I was there so much, Lena told me that if I got tired while her dad was napping, I could lie down on the couch in his room so I'd still be close enough to hear him. One late morning, I did exactly that. I fell asleep on the couch and had one of the most vivid dreams I've ever had. In the dream, Lena and I walked into this dim, narrow building. At first, it was just a hallway, but then it opened into a larger room. There was only soft, natural light, and the back wall seemed open to the outside. I remember thinking it looked like an old, half-damaged building. In the middle of that open space, there was a hot tub, and Lena and I were in it together. I'll just say the dream was definitely not unpleasant. I did have a small crush on her at the time, so I didn't think too much of it beyond that. Months later, her dog got very sick. She needed to take him to the vet and asked if I would come upstairs to help hold him on a towel while she got ready, because he was making a mess of himself. I had never been upstairs in her private space before. When I walked into her room, I froze. The layout was almost exactly like the place in my dream. Her upstairs area wasn't just a bedroom, it was more like a little apartment. You walked in through a hallway, with her office off to one side, and then it opened into this large, dim room. There wasn't a hot tub, of course, but there was a bed, furniture, and a huge sliding glass door at the back that led out to a balcony. The lighting was low and soft, just like in the dream. That was when I realized the building from my dream wasn't some random place. It was her room. I had never been up there before. I had no reason to know what it looked like. About a year later, I told someone that story, and they asked me if I had ever considered that it might have been astral projection. That was the first time the idea really clicked for me. I've had other dreams about Lena, but none of them were ever that vivid again. That one felt different. It felt less like something my mind invented, and more like I had somehow wandered into a place I wasn't supposed to know yet. Okay, so this happened right around midnight, when 2025 was turning into 2026. I was at home with my family, but we weren't really doing anything big for New Year's. No party, no loud music, nothing like that. It was just a quiet night. Then I suddenly remembered I had left a load of clothes sitting in the washing machine. And you know how it is. Once you remember wet laundry exists, it starts haunting you from the other room. So I figured I should go hang everything outside before I forgot again. We live in this villa-style house, and along the side wall, we have these metal racks where we usually hang clothes to dry. The only thing is, it was already around midnight, and that side of the house was completely dark. Still, I didn't think much of it. I just grabbed the clothes and went out by myself. So I'm standing there, hanging each piece one by one, when I suddenly hear voices. Not from behind me, not from the street. They were coming from the other side of the wall, where my neighbor's house is. It sounded like a few people were having a conversation, and they were so close to the wall that it honestly felt like they were sitting right there, facing my direction. Like the only thing between us was that thin wall. At first, I tried to listen properly, just to figure out what they were saying. But the strange thing was, I couldn't understand a single word. It didn't sound like any language I recognized. Usually, even when you don't understand someone's language, you can kind of guess the rhythm or where it might be from. But this was different. It sounded like pure gibberish, like voices pretending to be a conversation. For a second, I told myself, maybe they're just hanging out for the New Year countdown. But then it hit me. That house was completely dark. No porch light, no window lights, nothing. And then I remembered something even worse. Nobody lived there. The house next door was empty. It wasn't rented out. No one was supposed to be inside, let alone sitting outside in total darkness beside the wall, talking right next to me at midnight. The second my brain put all of that together, my body reacted before I could even think. I just grabbed myself and ran back into the house so fast, I'm pretty sure I broke a personal record. And ever since that night, I have never gone out to hang clothes on those racks after dark again. Absolutely not. The laundry can wait until sunrise. I've been thinking about this for over a year now, and honestly, I still don't really know what I saw that night. This happened in Dublin, Ireland, near an old Catholic church with a park around it. The layout matters a bit because it makes the whole thing harder for me to explain away. There's a river running through the park, and one road with a narrow footpath on the left that crosses over a little bridge. The area is usually pretty well lit by street lamps, and there's a decent-sized car park near the river. On the far side of that car park, there's a gate leading into a small housing estate where I used to live. It was the kind of place where everybody knew everybody. That gate was the only other way into the car park. That night, I was walking home from the gym. A few weeks before, I'd had a really unsettling experience where someone followed me through a different park, so I was more alert than usual. I kept checking around me, making sure there wasn't anyone acting strange nearby. Just before I stepped onto the bridge, I turned to look behind me. There was no one there. At least, not that I could see. But when I turned back around, there was suddenly a woman walking toward the bridge. She was very old, maybe late 80s or early 90s, and she was close enough that I should have noticed her before. That's the part I keep coming back to. There's no way she should have been able to get that near without me seeing her. She was dressed completely in white, from what I could tell, and she was carrying 2 shopping bags. That felt wrong immediately. It was late, all the shops were closed, and it was a freezing February night. She wasn't dressed for the weather at all. As I got closer to the end of the bridge, she stopped. Then she let out this scream. I don't even really want to call it a scream, because it didn't sound human. It was this sharp, piercing screech that cut straight through the quiet. My whole body reacted before I could think. I just started walking faster, trying not to run, trying not to panic. A few seconds later, I looked back, and she was gone. Not walking away, not turning a corner, just gone. The only place she could have disappeared that quickly was down the steep embankment by the river. But I knew that bank well from growing up around there. Even as a kid, I struggled to keep my balance on it. An elderly woman carrying 2 shopping bags would not have been able to scramble down there silently in a matter of seconds. And I didn't hear anything. No footsteps, no splash, no rustling. Nothing. The whole place had gone quiet again, like the sound had been swallowed. Later on, I kept thinking about the old stories of the banshee. In Irish folklore, she's sometimes seen wearing white, and she wails or shrieks as a warning that someone in a family is going to die. Some stories even say she can be seen near water, washing bloody clothes. I keep wondering about those bags she was carrying. What was in them? And how did she vanish so quickly? The strangest part is that not long after that night, my grandmother Nora was hospitalized. Thankfully, she survived at the time, but she only lived for a few more months after that. I'm not saying I definitely saw a banshee, but I've never been able to make it make sense any other way. This happened to my dad, not to me, but I've heard him tell it enough times that it has stayed with me. Back when he was in college, he used to visit his friend Ramesh's house to watch cricket matches. Sometimes the match would go late, and by the time it ended, it was too late for him to return to his rented room. On those nights, he would just sleep over at his friend's place. But one night, he decided he really needed to go back. He had college work waiting for him, and he didn't want to leave it unfinished. The way back had a shortcut through a very empty stretch of land. It wasn't exactly a forest, but it had that dry, abandoned feeling, almost like a dead patch of jungle. The road was rough, and there were no houses nearby, just open land, scattered trees, and silence. As he was passing one particular tree, he suddenly heard voices. It sounded like a man and a woman arguing. He couldn't make out the words, but the tone was clear. They sounded upset, almost like they were in the middle of a serious fight. And that was the part that bothered him, because there was no one there. No house, no light, no sign of people anywhere nearby. He kept walking, but he remembered that sound. It felt wrong. Later, he told his friend Ramesh about it. His friend didn't laugh it off. Instead, they both got curious and decided to go back to that same place another night, around the same time, maybe close to midnight. And they heard it again. The same kind of voices, the same argument. Still no clear words, just the sound of two people fighting somewhere in the darkness. They searched around to see if someone needed help, but there was nobody. No couple, no villagers, no one hiding behind the trees. The only things nearby were empty land and a few cooler factories, all closed for the night. After that, they didn't really talk about it much. They never told many people either. Maybe because it sounded too strange. Maybe because there was no proper explanation. This was more than 25 years ago now. Later on, Ramesh died from an illness that went untreated, and the following year, my dad broke his leg while traveling. I sometimes wonder if those things were somehow connected to what they heard that night, but my dad doesn't believe that at all. He says, bad things happen in life, and not everything needs to be tied to one strange moment. Still, I asked him more than once if there could have been houses nearby, or if maybe he misunderstood what he heard. He was very sure. He told me it happened twice, and the second time his friend heard it too. In that area, people usually slept early, around 8 or 9 at night, and this was much later than that. There was no reason for anyone to be out there, arguing in the dark, in the middle of such an empty place. So I keep coming back to the same question. What were those voices? Last winter, I was walking home from a late bar with a friend of mine. We lived in this quiet little town in northern France, the kind of place where, after midnight, the streets feel almost abandoned. We were heading back toward my car, and everything around us was completely still. Then we reached this small square, and standing right in the middle of it were two people. They were unusually tall, both of them, just standing there close together. They were dressed in these strange costume-like outfits, almost like they had come from a Halloween party, except it wasn't Halloween. They were facing each other, staring, not saying a word. That was the first thing that unsettled me. The silence. At that hour, in a town that empty, you can hear everything. Your own footsteps, your breathing, a jacket moving when someone shifts. But they were silent. My friend and I tried to act normal. We walked past them, pretending we weren't bothered, even though I could feel my whole body tightening up. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then we heard footsteps behind us. They had started following us. One of them began mumbling something, but it wasn't any language I could recognize. It was low and broken, like words being dragged through his throat. And between the sounds, he would growl. Not like someone joking around, not like someone trying to scare people. It sounded wrong, almost animal. We picked up our pace. Neither of us said anything at first, but I knew my friend was scared too. You can feel that kind of fear without needing to look at someone. Then, suddenly, there was this violent banging behind us. They were hitting a bus shelter, hard. The shelter was only a few meters behind us, close enough that the sound cracked through the whole street. That was when the fear changed. Before that, I was thinking, maybe they're drunk. Maybe they're messing with us. But once they started smashing that shelter, it felt real. They were willing to be violent. We didn't look back. I wanted to, but I was afraid that if I turned around, they would be much closer than I expected. And that was the strangest part. Their footsteps sounded like they were still farther away, but somehow the bus shelter they hit had been right behind us. It didn't make sense. It felt like the distance between us and them kept changing. When the banging started again, we ran. Not jogged, not hurried. We sprinted. I remember my heart pounding so hard it almost drowned out everything else. I was digging through my pocket while running, trying to find my car key, but my hands were shaking so badly I couldn't feel anything properly. When we finally reached the car, I still couldn't find the key. We ducked behind it, trying to stay low, and I forced myself to look back toward the square. And they were gone. Completely gone. At first, I felt relieved. Then I felt something worse. Because from where they had been, there was no way they could have disappeared that quickly. The square was open. The side streets were too far away, except for the road we had just taken. If they had kept walking, we should have seen them. If they had run, we should have heard them. But there was nothing. No footsteps, no voices, no growling. Just the empty street again. I eventually found the key, and we got into the car as fast as we could. Neither of us spoke for a while. We just sat there, trying to understand what had happened. I still think about it sometimes. The costumes were creepy, yes. The way they followed us was terrifying. But what stayed with me most was the sound one of them made. That awful mumbling and growling. It didn't sound like a person trying to scare us. It sounded almost inhuman. I was eating a late dinner the other night, probably close to 9:30. The whole house had already gone quiet. Everybody was asleep, except me and my dog. I was sitting in the living room with the TV on, just trying to relax a little. I was on the couch, and my dog was stretched out on the ottoman right in front of me. Everything felt normal. Then, out of nowhere, this small red hand appeared between the couch and the ottoman, right at the level of the furniture. And I mean, it was just there. My dog saw it at the same time I did and lunged straight at it. The second he moved, the hand dropped down and vanished. Not like something fell. Not like it slipped behind anything. It disappeared in a way that just did not feel natural. For a moment, I honestly could not even react. It happened so fast that my brain was still trying to catch up with what my eyes had seen. My dog ran out of the room after that and would not come back to me, which made it even worse. He does not usually act like that. So I tried to tell myself it had to be something normal. Maybe a toy. Maybe a piece of fabric. Maybe something had fallen between the couch and the ottoman and we both just saw it weird. So I moved the furniture. There was nothing there. Nothing under the couch. Nothing under the ottoman. Nothing stuck between them. No toy. No scarf. No food. Just empty floor. That is when I started really thinking about everything that has happened in this house. I have felt for a while now that certain things are drawn to me here. I already know of two spirits that seem to stay around us for almost 3 years. One felt like an older woman, and the other felt like a man. They never seemed harmful. It was more like they wanted to be noticed. Once I acknowledged them, the activity eventually slowed down. I have not felt much from them in maybe 9 months, so I started thinking maybe they moved on. But this felt different. A few weeks ago, around 2 in the morning, our Ring camera went off and woke everyone up. When we checked, the storm door had suddenly flown open hard, like something yanked it. I know wind can do strange things, but nothing else outside moved. Not the plants, not the flag, not the trees. Just the door. So this morning, I was still trying to convince myself maybe I had imagined the hand. Or maybe my dog thought a crumb had dropped. I checked under the furniture again. Still nothing. The hand itself is what I cannot stop thinking about. It was small, maybe half the size of an adult hand, but bigger than a little child's. It was red, kind of bright, almost like a glove with a soft, dim light inside it. The fingers were short. I only saw it for a second, but I know what I saw. My dog and I both locked onto it at the exact same time. And then it was gone. I was scared, but I stayed calm. I have noticed that whatever is here will sometimes do one big thing, something that really gets my attention, and then after that, it goes quiet again. Almost like it just watches. Before, with the older woman, I used to hear her talking really fast to the man. She would say these long, rushed sentences, and he would answer with only a word or two. Then she would start right back up again. But this little red hand? I do not know what that was, and I do not think it belonged to the same spirits I felt before. My mom had a stroke back in August of 2018. At first, we honestly thought she might pull through. There were little signs that made us hopeful, the kind of things you cling to when someone you love is lying in a hospital bed. But then everything changed so quickly. She developed pneumonia while she was in the hospital, and within a few days, she was gone. And I should say this about my mom. Her name was Marianne, and she was the heart of our family, truly. Everything revolved around family with her. Her children, her grandchildren, everyone being together, that was what mattered most to her. After she passed, strange things started happening. The first one was at the funeral home. We had all gone there to say our final goodbyes. Her children were there, her grandchildren, our partners, all of us standing in that room together. And then the lights started flashing. Not flickering. Not a weak little blink you could explain away. I mean, the whole room was flashing. Hard and fast, almost violently. Everyone saw it. We were just standing there, stunned. After that, my sister Elena and I went to Mum's flat to start sorting through her things. That was hard enough on its own, but while we were there, the television kept turning itself on. We were nowhere near the remote. Nobody had touched anything. It happened more than once. The strange part is, I have that same TV now, and it has never done it again. Not once. Then there was the smoke alarm. It started going off for no reason. We changed the batteries, checked everything, and there was nothing wrong. I used to handle all of Mum's maintenance, so I knew that alarm had never had a history of acting up. And after about a month, it stopped completely. Another time, I was at Elena's house, and we started arguing about something. I don't even remember what it was now. But suddenly, just like at the funeral home, her lights began flashing violently. That had never happened in her house before. And it never happened again. There were other electrical things too, smaller ones, but enough that I actually started keeping a record of them. It became too noticeable to ignore. All of it happened within the first month after Mum passed. Then, just like that, it stopped. Talking about it now brings back a few other memories from her final days in the hospital. Near the end, Mum started seeing people I couldn't see. One time, she told me there was a tall, thin man in a dark hat sitting in the chair beside her bed. She described him so plainly, like he was just there. Another time, she stared into the corner of the room, pointed, and said, "Those two don't like me." She wasn't frightened when she said it, not at all. But I'll be honest, I was. What stayed with me is that the people she saw didn't seem to be family. You always hear stories about people seeing relatives near the end, but that wasn't what she described. I don't know how any of it works. I only know what we saw, what we felt, and how for that 1 month after she left us, it really felt like something was still moving around the edges of our lives. I'm 55 now, and in all these years, this is the only thing I've ever experienced that I still can't explain. It happened when I was 18. I grew up in the UK, and back then, my friend Darren and I had this ridiculous habit of trying to sneak into posh events. We thought it was funny. We were young, broke, and convinced we were much cleverer than we actually were. That summer, we decided to head to the Henley Regatta for the weekend, mostly because we'd heard there might be free champagne floating around if you looked confident enough. Before we went, someone we vaguely knew told us there was an old abandoned house near Henley where we could sleep for a couple of nights. Not exactly luxury accommodation, but at 18, free had a certain sparkle to it. He gave us rough directions from the train station, and after wandering about for a while, we eventually found the place. It was a big, filthy, off-white house sitting back in its own grounds. 2 floors, loads of rooms, maybe 20 or more. The windows and doors on the ground floor had mostly been boarded up, except for one window where the boards had been pulled away. So, naturally, being idiots, we climbed in. Inside, the place was bare and grim. Old floorboards, dust everywhere, that stale smell empty buildings get. Then we noticed one room downstairs where strange symbols had been drawn across the floor. There were melted candles around them too, all hardened into little wax puddles. It put the wind up us, I won't lie. But it was still daylight, and daylight makes you brave in a very stupid way. So we told ourselves it was probably just local kids trying to scare people, and we decided to stay anyway. We went upstairs and picked a room as far from that symbol room as we could get. We left our sleeping bags there, then headed into Henley for the regatta. We got back to the house around 1 in the morning. The place felt completely different in the dark. Colder somehow. Quieter too, but not peaceful. We climbed back in through the window, made our way upstairs, and settled into our sleeping bags. Darren fell asleep pretty quickly. I didn't. I was lying there, staring into the darkness, trying to drift off, when I heard footsteps. They were coming from down the corridor. Slow. Clear. One step after another on those old wooden boards. At first, I thought maybe I'd imagined it, but then they kept coming, closer and closer. Every creak seemed to land right inside my chest. Then the footsteps stopped, right outside our door. I remember lying there absolutely frozen. My heart was hammering so hard I could hear it. I was waiting for the door to open, or for someone to knock, or for something to happen. But nothing did. No movement, no voice, no footsteps leaving. Just silence. And that was the part that scared me most. Those floorboards were loud. If somebody had walked away, I would have heard it. There was no carpet, no rugs, nothing to muffle the sound. Whoever, or whatever, had stopped outside that door simply didn't move again. I must have lain awake for hours. 3 hours, maybe more. Too scared to wake Darren, too scared to move, too scared to even breathe properly. I think I eventually slept a little before morning, but I never told Darren what happened. At the time, I suppose I thought he'd just laugh or call me mad. It's not the most dramatic ghost story in the world. No face at the window, no floating figure, no screaming. Just footsteps in an abandoned house stopping outside my door. But even now, decades later, I can still remember exactly how frightened I was. Some things don't need to do much to stay with you. I don't really know how else to explain this, but whenever it happens, I'm almost always by myself. The strangest moments usually happen when I'm standing at the kitchen sink. I'll be washing dishes or rinsing something off, and then, out of nowhere, I feel something sort of scoop under my butt cheek. I know that sounds ridiculous, but it's the only way I can describe it. Almost like someone cups their hand, taps upward from underneath, and sort of lifts. It's happened more than once, and every time, I freeze because I know nobody else is there. That same spot in the kitchen has had other things happen too. I felt something breathing right down the back of my neck. Not a draft, not the air kicking on. Actual breath. And one time, I heard a whisper say a name close to mine, soft enough that it almost felt like it was inside the room and inside my head at the same time. A while back, maybe a year or so ago, something threw several old iron horseshoes across the room. They were aimed in my direction and toward my cat Luna. Thankfully, neither of us got hit, but it scared me so badly, I just stood there staring. I keep those horseshoes up on a shelf where they can't just slip off, and even if they did, they would fall straight down. They wouldn't fly across the room like someone had hurled them. Then yesterday morning, I woke up to the feeling of being held. It honestly felt like someone was spooning me, with heavy arms wrapped around my chest and my own arms pinned down at my sides. It didn't feel angry or violent, but it was incredibly heavy. I couldn't move for a moment, and the whole thing left me shaken. There was also something that happened a few years ago that I still think about. I was exploring an abandoned church with a couple of people, which I know now was not the smartest idea. We went down near the flooded basement, and I heard this deep snarl. Then I saw a pair of eyes staring at me from what looked like 10 feet up off the ground. This was in a small town in rural Illinois, not some place where an animal could easily be hiding up there, and definitely not somewhere a person could have been standing. I still don't have a normal explanation for it. When I was in junior high, I had another experience that felt impossible. I was walking through the upper walkway of the school gym during class, so the gym was completely empty. The seating was raised, with a path around the top, and I was just cutting through to get to another classroom. As I walked, I noticed I had two shadows. One looked exactly like me, with my hair down and my books in my hands. But the other shadow had a high ponytail and no books at all. It moved with me, but it wasn't me. There's one other thing too, and it feels different from the scary stuff. My grandfather, who passed away before I was born, used to collect marbles. For as long as I can remember, I've had this strange luck finding marbles in random places. I also find money all the time, anywhere from pennies to larger bills. Once, I even found close to $200. It's happened so often that it doesn't feel like coincidence anymore. I don't know what all of this means. Part of it feels playful, part of it feels protective, and part of it honestly scares me. I'd really appreciate any advice or insight from anyone who might understand what could be going on. So this happened a few years ago when I was 16, on a school volunteer trip in Cambodia. We were staying in this old guest house that had definitely seen better days. The lights flickered, the hallways were dim, the bathroom plumbing had a mind of its own, and the whole place had this heavy, strange atmosphere. Not necessarily evil, just off. Like the building was tired and didn't want us there. One night, pretty late, a few of us were sitting at the far end of the hallway, just talking and trying not to wake anyone up. I'd brought a deck of tarot cards with me, honestly for no good reason, and my friend Liana suddenly suggested we try using them to communicate with spirits. I know, brilliant teenage decision-making. She said she'd done it before and that nothing bad had ever happened, so I went back to my room, grabbed the cards, and we set them out on the floor. At first, it felt silly. We were whispering, half laughing, asking questions, waiting for something to happen. But maybe 10 minutes in, the temperature dropped. And I don't mean someone opened a door cold. I mean the hallway turned icy. It was around 30 degrees Celsius outside, and the hotel air conditioning barely worked, so there was no normal explanation for it. The joking stopped pretty fast. Then Liana pulled a card, looked at it, and went quiet. She said it meant we needed to stop the reading immediately. None of us liked that. The mood changed completely. The hallway suddenly felt too long, too dark, too still. But for some reason, we asked again if we should stop. She shuffled the card back into the deck properly, mixed everything up, and pulled again. It was the exact same card. That was enough for us. We packed everything up right away, and my roommate and I went back to our room. The second we stepped inside, I felt it. That horrible, skin-crawling feeling that something had followed us. I froze, and she froze too. We looked at each other without saying anything, and I could tell she felt it as well. Then the room got cold. Freezing cold. All at once, I was completely overwhelmed with fear. Not nervousness, not imagination, actual terror. The kind that makes your body go stiff before your brain can even explain why. Finally, my roommate said, very firmly, "Get out. You're not welcome here." And both of us looked toward the open window at the same time. I can't explain this properly, but it felt like something left through it. Not that we saw a shape exactly, more like the pressure in the room shifted, like something that had been standing too close finally moved away. But even after that, the rest of the night felt wrong. I kept feeling like someone was watching us from outside the window. Neither of us wanted to be alone, so we ended up sleeping in the same bed, barely sleeping at all. Even now, telling this gives me chills. I've been scared before, obviously, but I have never felt anything like that. There's something deeply awful about being absolutely certain you're being watched, even when you can't see anyone there. I still don't really know what happened that night. Maybe we scared ourselves. Maybe the place already had a strange energy, and we tapped into something we shouldn't have. But whatever it was, that card told us to stop twice, and I really wish we had listened the first time. I've never really told this story before, mostly because I was scared of what people would think of me. Whenever someone asked if I'd ever seen a ghost, I'd always say no. Not because I hadn't experienced something, but because I was embarrassed to admit it. This happened during my senior year of high school, and honestly, that whole year was awful. My parents were going through a divorce, and the house felt like it was always full of yelling. Every day, there was another fight, another slammed door, another reason to stay quiet. It got to the point where I barely spoke to either of my parents, and I had pulled away from my sister too. Some nights, I'd just stay at a friend's house because being home felt too heavy. But one night, I decided to sleep at my own house. I had this cat, Mila, who was basically glued to me. Wherever I went, she followed. And every night, she slept on my bed like it was her assigned post. So when I went into my room, there she was, curled up on my blanket like always. I changed clothes, got into bed, and started flipping through an old paperback book. After a while, I felt myself getting sleepy, so I set the book down and turned off the light. Within seconds, Mila jumped up. And I mean, jumped up. She started acting frantic, pacing around, scratching at the door, desperate to get out. I always kept my door closed so I wouldn't have to hear whatever was happening in the rest of the house. But she was panicking so badly that I got up and let her out. At the time, I just thought maybe she heard another cat outside or sensed something in the yard. I didn't think much of it. I actually remember lying back down and kind of laughing to myself, thinking, What is wrong with that cat? Then I looked toward the foot of my bed. My room was dark, but this was darker than the room itself. There was this shape there, almost like a figure, pure black. No face, no details, just arms and a torso, and it started climbing onto me. Before I could even understand what I was seeing, it was on top of me. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. It felt like it was choking me, pressing down on me, and I was fighting with everything I had to get it off. My whole body felt locked, but inside I was panicking. Somehow I managed to gather enough strength to yell, "Get off me!" And when I did, I shoved it hard to my left. Then it was gone. I sat up in complete shock, breathing hard, trying to understand what had just happened. I didn't turn the light off again. I didn't sleep in that room after that either. For weeks, I stayed on the couch. The house was already so chaotic that nobody even noticed. It actually feels good to finally say this out loud. I still don't know what it was or why it happened. I wasn't involved in witchcraft, paranormal stuff, or anything like that. I was just a teenager in a house full of pain, trying to get through one more night. And that night, whatever it was, my cat knew before I did. On Sunday, I reached out to someone named Celine, who does energy cleansing and other spiritual healing work. I've been going through a really difficult time, and while there's a longer story behind that, it isn't really the main point here. She seemed to feel that I needed help sooner rather than later, so she offered to do a free evaluation for me that same day. During it, she told me that there were negative energies around me, connected to things like fear, anxiety, abandonment, stress, vulnerability, and even suicidal energy. She said these energies were affecting my everyday life. I do consider myself a spiritual person, and in the past, I used to experience sleep paralysis quite often. That doesn't really happen to me anymore, but sometimes when I meditate, I still feel sensations that are kind of similar. Usually, for anything like that to happen, I would need to be lying flat on my back. The sensations are usually like vibrations or tingling, and sometimes I feel like I can't move. But that Sunday night, I went to bed completely exhausted. I normally sleep on my side, and that night was no different. I wasn't lying on my back at all. Then things started to feel strange. I honestly don't know whether what happened next was real, a dream, or something in between. My memory of it is blurry. It felt like I might have been dreaming and confused, or maybe awake but somehow outside of myself. At some point, I started feeling this extremely heavy vibration. It was much stronger than anything I had felt before, almost like something was trying to enter my body. It was intense, really intense. I didn't move, or maybe I couldn't move. I'm still not sure. It felt like it lasted for a long time. Then I started speaking, but it didn't feel like the words were really coming from me. It felt more like something was communicating through me. I think I said something out loud, close to, "I'm angry because I'm not here." The tone felt frustrated, maybe even slightly angry. Right away, I interpreted it as one of those negative energies expressing anger because it couldn't exist in a physical body the way I do. I know I said something else too, but I can't remember what it was. What I do remember clearly is the feeling of being invaded, like I didn't fully have control over my own body, and like I was saying things that didn't belong to my life or my thoughts. This was the first time I had ever experienced anything quite like that. It reminded me of sleep paralysis in some ways, but it was also very different. It was less terrifying somehow, but much more intense. That's the part I can't stop thinking about. Maybe it was just a dream. Maybe my mind was processing everything from the energy evaluation earlier that day. But it felt so real. I keep wondering whether something really was trying to communicate before being cleared away from me. Has anyone else ever experienced something like this? This happened around 21 years ago, back when my mother, Samina, was newly married to my father. It was just an ordinary evening at first. My mother was at home, and my father was still at his office, getting ready to leave. Like any husband and wife, they had that simple little conversation over the phone. She asked him what he wanted to eat when he got home. He told her he was craving kebabs. That was very normal for him, honestly. He loved eating them after work, so she didn't think anything of it. But right after the call ended, my mother heard footsteps upstairs. At that time, the house was more open than it is now. There was a long staircase leading down from the upper floor, and there wasn't any partition, so if someone came downstairs, you could clearly see them. And then she saw him, my father. He came down the stairs as if he had just woken up from sleep. He was yawning, rubbing his face a little, and he didn't mention the phone call. He didn't ask about food. He didn't ask for kebabs. He just looked at my mother and gently asked how she was, like he had been home the whole time. My mother froze inside, because only moments earlier, she had been speaking to him while he was still at the office. And his office was at least 30 minutes away. Then this version of my father walked toward the garage. My mother got scared and immediately told my father's sister, who was also in the house. His sister called him right away and asked, "Where are you?" My father sounded confused and said, "Why? I'm at the office." She didn't want to alarm him over the phone, so she simply said, "Okay," and ended the call. By the time they checked the garage, the figure was gone. A little while later, my real father came home, exactly when he should have. My mother told him everything, still shaken by what she had seen. He didn't laugh at her. He didn't dismiss it either. He just said, "Pray that whatever it was, it doesn't harm us, and that it leaves." My mother believed for a long time that there was some kind of presence near her in those days. In Islam, we are taught to recite Ayat al-Kursi, the verse of the throne, and not to try speaking to such beings because, if it was a jinn, it was better not to engage with it at all. I've dealt with sleep paralysis and dream state hallucinations for most of my life, so I'm not easily shaken by things that happen in the dark. At this point, I've gotten strangely used to waking up scared, realizing what's happening, calming myself down, and drifting right back off. But lately, something has changed. Over the past few weeks, I've started hearing things after I'm fully awake. Not in that foggy, half-dreaming place either. I mean awake, eyes open, aware of the room around me. It started with my closet. There are 3 doors on it, and one by one, they've begun making these soft cracking sounds at night, like they're shifting open just a little. Then my dresser joined in. It has those little loose metal pull handles, the kind that flip up, and now they jingle in the dark. My house does make noise. It creaks and pops when the weather changes, especially when the temperature drops outside, so I know what normal house sounds are like. This isn't that. These sounds feel close, intentional almost. And the part that bothers me most is that it never starts before 2 in the morning. I've gotten out of bed more than once, turned on the lights, checked the closet, checked the dresser, looked around for anything that could explain it. The second the lights come on, everything stops. I've looked for signs of mice or rats, but there are no droppings, no scratching, no chewed spots, nothing. I also keep my air conditioner fan running all night, so there's steady airflow in the room. I really don't think it's just a draft nudging things around. A few times now, I've woken up to these strange, high-pitched voices. At first, I told myself it was just part of the sleep paralysis, because that's the easiest explanation for me to accept. But these voices are new. They sound different from anything I've experienced before. They only last a few seconds after I wake up, and they never say anything I can understand. It's just quick, sharp gibberish, then silence. But the other noises keep going. The dresser handles still jingle. The closet doors still crack. I hear little shifting sounds among my things, even while I'm lying there completely awake, staring into the room and trying to convince myself I'm imagining it. Every time, I get up and investigate. Every time, it stops. Then I fall asleep again, and either it wakes me later that night, or it starts all over again the next night. I honestly don't know what I believe. I don't know if this is something physical, something psychological, or something I don't have a name for. But it's wearing me down. I'm exhausted, and the lack of sleep is starting to get to me. I'm wondering if I should set up a camera just to see what happens when I'm not looking. Part of me feels ridiculous even saying that, but another part of me needs to know. I've even wondered, half seriously, if it's some kind of house spirit thing. A brownie, maybe. I don't know. I just know that something in my room waits until I'm asleep, and lately, it feels like it's getting bolder. I've had a lot of people tell me I should share my story, and honestly, I never knew where to put it, because the truth about my husband's betrayal and the divorce that may be coming still isn't public. Not because I'm trying to protect him. I'm not. But because people who know us would be stunned. To everyone else, we looked solid. We looked happy. We looked like one of those couples people point to and say, "That's what I want." Even after so many years together, I thought we were still deeply in love. We were close, affectionate, connected. We had 3 kids, long work weeks, exhaustion, pregnancy, postpartum chaos, real life pressing in from every side, and somehow I still believed we were each other's safe place. That's part of what makes all of this feel so impossible to understand. My grandma, who I called Gigi, was my best friend. She lived right next door to me my whole life, and I spent so much time with her. My older kids got to know her too, and that still feels like one of the biggest blessings of my life. She was strong, funny, kind, and full of life. She never had to tear anyone down to fill a room, and she loved my grandpa with her whole heart. Their love was the kind that teaches everyone around it what devotion is supposed to look like. My mom grew up seeing that. My parents had that kind of marriage too. And I thought I had it. I really did. When Gigi passed away, my husband and I bought her house. 5 acres in Florida, right beside my parents. My kids could walk next door to their grandma's house the same way I did growing up. It felt like fate. It felt sacred. I took care of that house because, to me, it was a house built out of real love. Honest love. Forever love. We moved in on June 1st, 2024. Not long after, my husband and I were planning his vasectomy for later that year because we thought we were done having children. But I was already pregnant, and that was a whole emotional storm on its own. I had 2 kids and felt complete. I had made plans for my body, my life, my future. I was ready to become more than just wife and mom again. Then I found out I was pregnant with baby number 3. I even went to a clinic because at the time I thought ending the pregnancy was the right choice for me. But when they did the ultrasound, I was told I was just past the legal cutoff in Florida. 3 days passed, and the timing shook me. 3 days after moving into Gigi's house. 3 days after the law had changed. 3 generations of women in my family having 3 kids. Gigi had always told me, "You need one more baby." I remember thinking, she got her way. I struggled through that pregnancy. I won't pretend I was glowing and grateful every second, because I wasn't. I was depressed. I was grieving the life I thought I was about to step into. But when my son was born in March 2025, something in me knew he was meant to be here. I didn't understand the whole reason yet. Then came August 3rd, 2025. That night, my husband and I had been intimate, and afterward we were lying in bed, cuddled up, drifting off to sleep. I heard a notification on his phone. It wasn't his usual text sound, but I ignored it. I trusted him. We knew each other's phone passwords. We could grab each other's phones whenever we wanted, but we never really felt the need to. Then another notification came through, and I woke up with my whole body jolting, like electricity had gone through me. I heard, clear as anything, Gigi's voice say, "Open his phone." I was shaking. My heart was pounding. The hair on my arm stood up. I reached over him while he was sleeping, opened his phone, and right there was an app he had been using to message other women. Not one message, not one mistake. Dozens of threads, escort contacts, addresses, secret accounts, hidden apps, paid subscriptions, a secret credit card. The more I looked, the more my reality started folding in on itself. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't curiosity. This was a whole hidden life. I stayed awake until he had to get up for work. When he opened his eyes, I asked him, "Why are you cheating on me?" And instead of remorse, he snapped at me. He blamed me. Something in me shut down after that. I don't remember the next few days clearly. I know I was in shock. I know I wanted so badly to believe him when he said he never actually went through with anything. I know my brain was trying to protect me from the truth, because the truth was too much. But then a few days later, he called me into the bathroom to look at a painful rash that had suddenly broken out. And when I saw it, I screamed. It was severe. It was everywhere. And in that moment, there was no more denying what had happened. After hours of pressure, he finally admitted he had been with other women and told me I needed to get tested. I did. Thank God my test came back negative. I tested again and again afterward, because once trust has been shattered like that, peace does not come easily. I still don't fully know what was happening with him medically, but I know what it meant for me. Something woke me up before I could be exposed to something dangerous. Something protected me. Something protected my baby. Something protected my children. And I believe that something was Gigi, because he was never going to tell me. He was going to take it to the grave. The weeks after that were the darkest of my life. I was living in the same house with him, drowning in grief, rage, disgust, love, confusion, and humiliation all at once. I had thoughts that scared me. I imagined disappearing. I imagined leaving everything behind and becoming someone else somewhere far away. But my newborn kept me here. His tiny life anchored me when nothing else could. I truly believe he came into this world to save me from myself. He was my little lifeline, my heaven-sent reason to keep breathing. Then, on August 20th, I woke up with this heavy, overpowering feeling that there was more. Not just recent betrayal, more history, more lies. So I sat my husband down and said, "Tell me about the last 5 years. I don't even know why I chose 5 years. I had no proof of that timeline, no sign, no clue." But he confessed. He told me it had started in 2021. And then another piece of my life clicked into place in the most devastating way. In 2022, I had been diagnosed with high-risk HPV. I had believed it must have come from before him, something dormant from years earlier. Since then, I had gone through painful biopsies every few months to monitor for cervical cancer. He watched me suffer through that. He knew. And still he kept risking my health, my body, and my life. That is the part I still don't know how to hold. I never suspected him, not once. He was able to live two lives for years while I loved him completely. But the moment we moved into Gigi's house, it was like she said, "Not here, not in my home." And everything came into the light. I miss her every day. I feel her with me. I feel her guidance in that house, in the walls, in the land, in the little signs that keep showing up when I need them most. I don't know exactly what happens next. I don't know how long healing takes. I don't know what life looks like when the person you trusted most becomes the person who hurt you deepest. But I do know this. That house was built on love before him. It will be filled with love after him. And one day, I believe it will feel like home again. I want to tell you a story that has been passed around in my family for years, and honestly, it still gives people chills when they talk about it. It is one of those stories that sounds impossible at first, until you hear it from the people who lived through it. This happened sometime in the early 1990s in my mother's village in Azad, Kashmir, Pakistan. Back then, the village was not developed the way it is now. There were no bright streetlights, no easy transport, and once night fell, people usually stayed inside. Part of that was because of jackals and wild boars wandering around outside. But people also believed there were other things out there. Things you did not want to cross paths with after dark. One night, there was a family gathering at my grandmother's house. Everyone was sitting together, talking, laughing, and enjoying the evening when a few cousins started craving a special kind of tea. The problem was, there was none left in the house. So two of my uncles, I'll call them Haris and Hamza, decided to go and buy some from a shop. The shop was quite far away, because in those days, stores were not close by like they are now. They wrapped themselves up, stepped out into the cold night, and began walking. After a while, Haris suggested they cut through the fields to save time. Hamza looked around, did not see any animals, and agreed. So they left the main path and started walking through the dark fields. They had not gone too far when they saw an old man standing completely still in the middle of the field. He was dressed entirely in white. At first, they thought he was just some elderly man from the village, maybe someone passing through. But something about him felt wrong. He was not moving at all, not even a little. He was just standing there, quiet and still, as though he had been waiting for them. The two brothers tried to walk past him, but they could not. They said it felt as if something invisible was holding them in place. Their legs would not move forward, no matter how hard they tried. The night around them went strangely silent, and that is when fear really began to settle in. Then they turned and looked at the old man again, and he started growing taller. Slowly at first, then more and more. His body stretched upward into the darkness. Haris and Hamza could not move. They could not scream. They could not even look away. They just stood there, frozen, watching this figure rise higher and higher until he seemed to reach the sky itself. For what felt like a long, cruel minute, they were trapped there, staring at something no human being should ever have to see. Then, everything went blank. When they finally came back to their senses, they were no longer together. One of them was standing at one end of the village, and the other was at the opposite side. Both were completely alone, confused, and terrified. They did not try to find each other. They did not even go back to my grandmother's house that night. They were so shaken that each of them went to the nearest relative's home and stayed there until morning. At dawn, they returned to the family gathering, pale, sweating, and devastated. They told everyone what had happened, and the fear in their faces was enough for the family to believe them. And after that night, until the village became more developed, No one in our family went outside after 10 p.m. Not for tea, not for company, not for anything. I wanted to share something that happened to me because, honestly, it felt so unusual that I still don't quite know what to make of it. I've had sleep paralysis before, especially around certain times in my cycle, so it isn't completely new to me. Usually, it's pretty straightforward. I wake up, can't move for a little while, panic a bit, then eventually pull myself out of it. Every now and then, I'll drift into something that feels almost out of body, but nothing that ever left me this shaken or this curious. The night before this happened, I barely slept. I'd been dealing with a stretch of insomnia, stayed awake way too late, sat through an online meeting in the morning, and by then I was completely drained. So I decided to lie down for a nap. The moment I started dozing off, it felt like I was dropping into REM sleep almost instantly, then jolting back out, over and over again. As that was happening, I started seeing all these vivid visuals. At first, it was swirling geometric patterns, almost like glowing kaleidoscope shapes. Then it turned into something more organized, almost like scenes unfolding in front of me, the way those surreal generated videos look when they shift from one image into another. And weirdly, whenever I tried to really focus on what I was seeing, I'd get hit with this wave of laughter. Pure, random, euphoric laughter. It was like something in me couldn't stop giggling. I must have slipped in and out of sleep paralysis 3, maybe 4 times within less than an hour. But then one episode happened that was completely different from anything I'd ever experienced before. I saw this soft white orb glowing in front of me. Not harsh or blinding, more like a warm, living light. And the strangest part was that it didn't feel threatening at all. It felt familiar, comforting, almost intimate, like it belonged to me somehow or had known me for a very long time. The thought that came into my mind was, is this some kind of angel? And even now, looking back, that thought feels less like a question and more like a recognition. Then it started speaking. I can't remember the exact words, which frustrates me, because I know whatever it said felt important. But I remember how the voice felt. It was deeply calming. It sounded layered, like several voices speaking together in harmony. There was something both feminine and masculine in it, something gentle but also powerful. It didn't just sound comforting, it felt comforting, like the voice itself carried reassurance. What really unsettled me was the way it moved. I was lying on my side facing out into the room, and at first the orb was right there in front of my face. Then it slowly floated upward, hovered above me, and drifted behind me where I couldn't see it anymore. It kept speaking while it moved, and that's when I started to panic a little, because once it was behind me, I had no idea what it was doing. Then I felt this sensation in my upper back, almost between my shoulders, like the light was entering me, or being absorbed into me. It wasn't painful. It was just incredibly strange and impossible to ignore. And the second that happened, everything stopped. The paralysis ended. The visions ended. The whole experience just lifted. What's also wild is that even though I'd only slept a few broken hours total, I woke up feeling completely restored. Not groggy, not drained, just deeply rested, like I'd had a full night of real sleep. Part of me thinks maybe it was my subconscious trying to speak to me in the only language it could at that moment. Maybe it was my mind processing something profound and turning it into this vivid, symbolic experience. Or maybe it was just one of those rare sleep paralysis episodes that felt unusually peaceful instead of terrifying. I don't know exactly what it was. I just know it felt meaningful. And even now, when I think back on that glowing light and the way it seemed to know me, I can't shake the feeling that, for a few moments, I touched something I was meant to hear. So this happened when I was around 22. I was at a friend's place in Rehoboth, Massachusetts, sitting around a backyard fire with a group of people I knew well. We did that kind of thing all the time, just hanging out, talking, laughing, a few people drinking, a few smoking cigars or weed. Nothing wild. We were all pretty laid-back, responsible people. At that point in my life, I'd only recently started drinking, and I'd never touched weed or anything stronger. No history of mental illness, nothing like that. That night, I'd had maybe 3 or 4 hard ciders, and I'd also been smoking these unbelievably cheap, cherry-flavored cigars we'd picked up on a trip out of state. They were terrible. I remember thinking afterward that maybe whatever happened to me had to be connected to those cigars, or maybe the mix of that and the alcohol. I was trying hard to explain it away, but after a couple of hours out by the fire, something changed. Out of nowhere, I felt this strange wave come over me. The only way I can describe it now is that it felt like the beginning of a panic attack. But at the time, I'd never even had one before, so I had no frame of reference. It was this growing heaviness, this dread that seemed to settle over my whole body. It felt wrong. It scared me immediately. But I didn't say anything because I didn't want to alarm anyone or make a scene. And then, at the peak of it, I wasn't there anymore. I know how unbelievable that sounds, but I'm telling you exactly how it felt. Instead of the fire and my friends, I was seeing this completely different place. It looked dark and futuristic, almost like the deck of some strange ship, with a pool in the middle, lit in that cold, artificial way sci-fi movies always look. There was a girl there, around my age, talking to me like she knew me. She looked oddly familiar, but I didn't actually know who she was. There were other people around too, moving through the space, but I can't clearly remember them. Then just like that, I snapped back. I was sitting by the fire again with everyone else, like nothing had happened. I didn't react outwardly. I kept it all inside. But in my head, I was thinking, what just happened to me? The weirdest part is that even though I was scared, part of me was also curious. A part of me almost wanted it to happen again. And it did. A little while later, that same heavy, terrifying sensation came back. And once again, I was somewhere else. Not the exact same moment as before, but the same place, or at least something very close to it. I remember moving through that dim room, trailing behind people near the water, like I was inside a scene that was already happening without me. It felt real while it was happening, more real than it should have. I don't know how many times it happened altogether, but after a while, the fear started to win out. I got to the point where I couldn't just sit there pretending I was okay anymore. So I left. I got in my car and started driving home, which was about half an hour away. As soon as I got in the car, I called my girlfriend. The phone started ringing, but almost immediately there was this awful crackling sound, glitchy, metallic, wrong. Then she picked up, and before I could even say anything, there was this bizarre noise on the line. It sounded like breathing mixed with some kind of distorted metallic feedback, almost like someone moving their tongue around in their mouth right next to the receiver. The first thing she said was, "What was that?" And honestly, for a split second, I felt relieved, because if she heard it too, then maybe I wasn't losing my mind. I told her what had happened at the fire and asked her to stay on the phone with me while I drove. I was scared it might happen again while I was behind the wheel, and I didn't want to be alone if I crashed or something went wrong. Thankfully, I made it home fine. I went straight downstairs to my room and laid on the bed, thinking maybe whatever it was had passed. But within minutes, I felt that same sensation coming on again. The dread, the heaviness, that awful wave. And then I was back in another place, seeing another scene that had nothing to do with the room I was actually in. When it stopped, I called her again. The dialing noise did that same strange thing one more time, though not as intensely. After that, eventually, I fell asleep. And that was it. It never happened again. Not once. Not even close. I know how all of this sounds. I really do. It sounds made up or exaggerated, or like something from the mind of somebody unraveling. But I'm just telling you what I experienced. I've gone over it so many times in my head. Maybe it was something in those cheap cigars. Maybe it was some bizarre reaction between the alcohol and whatever was in them. Maybe somebody slipped something to me, though I never believed my friends would do that. What I could never explain, though, was the phone. That part stayed with me. My girlfriend and I broke up years later, and every once in a while I still think about reaching out to ask if she remembers that night, especially those sounds on the call. But enough time has passed now that it would feel strange to bring it up. So mostly, I just live with it as one of those things I can't explain. A night that lasted only a few hours, but never really left me. I don't really know how to explain this without sounding dramatic, but I've been carrying it around for a while, and I think I finally need to say it out loud. A few months ago, sometime after midnight, something happened that I still can't fully make sense of. It felt like this sudden shift came over me. My ears popped hard, almost like the pressure in the room changed all at once, and then there was this strange rush of energy through my whole body. Not painful, just intense, unsettling. I remember hearing songs I'd heard 100 times before, but that night they sounded different, like there was something hidden underneath them, some deeper meaning I was suddenly able to catch. It wasn't like hearing voices exactly. It was more like I could feel something trying to communicate, almost brushing up against my thoughts. When I finally went to sleep, I didn't rest well. I woke up feeling deeply uneasy, almost paranoid, like something had already started and I was behind on understanding it. That morning I heard about a helicopter incident on the news, and for whatever reason it felt connected, even though I couldn't explain why. Outside, the whole town looked off. There was this hazy film in the air, and even the sunlight looked too bright, almost electric, like the world had been turned up too high. My phone kept flickering and glitching, cutting in and out for no reason. A couple of strangers reached out to me in ways that felt weirdly pointed, asking my name like it mattered more than it should have. And people's eyes. I know this sounds odd, but they seemed different somehow. Sharper, brighter, almost reflective. By that night, things got even stranger. Streetlights and house lights around me started shutting off in sections, not just one bulb here or there, but whole stretches at a time. It honestly looked like something was draining the energy right out of them. Then there were helicopters circling low near the area where that first experience happened. Cars I didn't recognize kept passing through my neighborhood again and again, moving slow, looping back, like they were watching for something, or someone. The whole atmosphere felt wrong, heavy, charged. The next evening, it kept going. Some of the same cars were back, and I started noticing that my coordination felt unusually sharp, like my body was reacting faster than normal. Later, right before bed, my cousin Mara and I heard rustling outside the house. We checked, and there was nobody there. We moved into the bedroom, trying to ignore it, but then the same sound started again just outside the window. That was the moment it really sank in that this didn't feel random anymore. For several days after that, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being tracked or hunted by something I didn't understand. Maybe not just people, maybe something beyond that, or people who knew more than they should. At the same time, I felt weirdly heightened, like my awareness had expanded. I was noticing patterns everywhere, picking up on things I would have normally missed, seeing connections that felt hidden in plain sight. Then, little by little, it stopped. That's almost the hardest part. It didn't end with some answer or clear event. It just faded. And ever since then, I've been left trying to figure out what actually happened. What makes it harder to dismiss is that I wasn't alone for a lot of it. 2 other people witnessed most of what happened after that first night. They saw the lights go out. They noticed the cars. They heard the sounds outside. So whatever it was, it didn't feel like it was only happening inside my head. I've had vivid, unsettling dreams for as long as I can remember, going all the way back to childhood. Most of them were nightmares, but then one particular dream started repeating, and that's when things began to feel different. In that dream, I'm alone in my apartment at night. Everything is dim, almost completely black, except for a little moonlight coming in through the window because I live high up. I'm moving through the room like I'm searching for something, though I never know what it is. Then, the door slowly opens, and this shadowy figure steps inside and comes after me. I panic, jump out the window, and somehow I don't die. I just stumble, catch myself, and start running. Somehow, I always end up in a city, breathless and confused, and that's where I wake up. That same dream came back again and again for nearly 3 years. Almost every time, it followed the same pattern. He appears, I escape through the window, I run, and I end up in that city. It became so familiar that it felt less like a dream and more like a place I was being dragged back to. Even after those repeated dreams stopped, the man never really disappeared. I kept dreaming about him in different ways. At first, he was only a shadow, someone without a face. But little by little, I started seeing him more clearly. Eventually, he began speaking to me in the dreams too. The situations changed. Some dreams repeated, others were completely new. But somehow, he was always there. There was one dream where he appeared much younger, maybe around 16 or 17. In that one, he was sitting quietly in a chair at a crowded gathering. He wore a green and white striped shirt, and what stood out most was how clear he looked compared to everything else. He had long, heavy, wavy brown hair falling over his forehead, and very dark eyes. The strange part was that the room was full of people, but I couldn't make out a single other face. His was the only one I could see. Before that, though, I had already seen him as an adult in other dreams. Back then, he felt angry, like he was carrying something intense toward me. Whenever he looked at me, I felt this sudden force, like something yanked me sharply backward, and I'd wake up immediately. That younger version of him only showed up once or twice. Most of the time, he appears older. In the dreams I've had over the last several years, he usually looks the same. His hair is styled back, neat, except for one strand that always falls forward. He dresses in dark clothes, usually a black button-up shirt, almost like he's dressed for some formal occasion. Once, and only once, I saw him with a scar on his face, something like a burn mark stretching from near his ear across the bridge of his nose and down toward his cheek. That image stayed with me because it was so specific, but it never showed up again. I'm sharing this because for a while, the dreams had actually stopped. I hadn't seen him in over 2 years, and I thought maybe whatever it was had finally passed. I even went to a spiritual healing center at one point, just trying to find some kind of peace, and for a while, it seemed to help. But recently, he started appearing again. I've spoken to therapists and tried to make sense of it in a logical way, but no one has really been able to explain why this one figure keeps returning. So this all happened over the span of maybe a month, and even now, when I think back on it, I still get that same feeling. It started one evening when I was out playing basketball with 3 friends at a local rec center near my neighborhood. I'll call them Jake, Sarah, and Mariah. While we were there, this dog wandered up to us. No collar, no owner in sight, but it didn't look starved or injured. It actually looked pretty well taken care of, which made it even stranger. Mariah immediately got worried and said we should take it to the shelter. I didn't love that idea because I kept thinking about how animals can end up getting put down if nobody claims them. But she felt strongly that we had to do something. By the next day, she'd made flyers, and since it was my area, I helped everyone figure out the best places to hang them up around the parks and neighborhood streets. By the time we finished, it was late. We stopped at one last corner and put up the final 2 flyers. Then we all got back into Mariah's car, trying to decide where to go eat. Mariah was driving, Sarah was in the front seat, and Jake and I were in the back. Everything had gone quiet for a second when Sarah suddenly said, really softly, "Is that a head?" I looked up, and across the street, just above this short brick wall, there was what looked like the face of an old woman staring directly at us. All 4 of us just froze. And then something happened that I still can't explain. Her face seemed to flicker with light, almost like strobes passing over it. Not bright, not like lightning exactly, just this unnatural shifting light. The weird part was, there was nothing around that could have caused it. No passing car, no flashlight, nothing. Mariah screamed and hit the gas. Because it was my neighborhood, I knew the way the street curved and where that yard opened up. So when we turned the corner, I looked over, expecting maybe to catch her moving or turning to watch us leave. But she didn't. She was still there, perfectly still, staring at the exact spot where our car had been, like a statue. That was the first thing. Then maybe a week later, it was just me, Jake, and Sarah. We were driving back to my house, and Sarah was behind the wheel. We were coming up to the last intersection before my street when both of us saw something dart across the road. The best way I can describe it is, it looked like the upper half of a man in a wheelchair, all pale beige, almost washed out looking, and it moved unnaturally fast into a driveway. Sarah saw it. I saw it. Jake somehow missed it. We parked right away, and as soon as we got out of the car, we heard it. What sounded like at least a dozen people screaming from inside the house where that thing had vanished. This time, Jake heard it too. At that point, it felt serious enough that we went and got my stepdad to come check the house with us, because we genuinely thought someone inside could be in danger. But when we checked, everything was normal. An elderly woman lived there, and she said she hadn't heard a thing. Nothing was wrong. At least, nothing we could see. A little after that, I went on a trip to Denver with my ex. She was visiting her childhood best friend for a birthday, and we stayed in the guest room at her friend's family home. The room we slept in had the thermostat, so during the night, her friend's mom came in to adjust it while we were asleep. I didn't find out until we were driving back to New Mexico, but apparently that woman told my ex she'd seen an old woman standing on my side of the bed. She said she considered herself a medium. She tried to speak to whatever she saw, and the only response she got was that the woman was a grandmother. Then it all built up to one night I'll never forget. I woke up from a dream about UFOs sometime around 4 in the morning. At first, I noticed something odd, but not scary. I saw one of my band shirts hanging over the TV in my room. I was confused because I didn't remember putting it there. Then I realized I couldn't move. I'd had sleep paralysis before, so that part wasn't new. Back then especially, it happened to me sometimes. But what happened next was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Near the window on the left side of my room, a face started to appear. It was that same old woman from the park. At first, she looked faint, almost like an after image, like when you stare at a bright light too long and then still see it when you close your eyes. Not fully solid, not fully human. But every time I moved my eyes, she moved too. Wherever I looked, she followed, and each time she became clearer, brighter, more defined. I was trying to call out for my mom. In my head, I thought I was actually making noise, really shouting. I remember wondering why nobody was coming. Then the face drifted closer. The last time it stopped, it was maybe 6 feet away from me, staring directly into my eyes. And in my head, I heard a voice say, "I can hear you." Right after that, the paralysis broke. I could move again instantly. I got out of bed, rushed out of my room, grabbed the family dog with a treat, and slept on the couch beside him for the rest of the night. The next morning, or really, closer to noon, my mom asked me why I had been making so much noise in my room during the night. And later that day, when I opened my closet, everything inside was completely torn up and out of place. To this day, it's still the strangest paranormal experience of my life. Sure, parts of it can be explained away if you really want to. Maybe the woman at the park was just some unsettling person standing in the dark. Maybe the thing in the road was an animal or a trick of perspective. Maybe that woman in Denver was just imagining things. And obviously, sleep paralysis is real. Sleepwalking is real too. I understand all of that. But deep down, I still believe something followed me for that stretch of time in 2011. Something I can't really explain, and something I've never forgotten. Even now, all these years later, it still feels real when I tell it. And honestly, Santa Fe has always felt like one of those places where strange things can happen. There's so much history there, so much weight to it. Sometimes I still wonder whether other people have seen things too. Hey everyone, I was talking with my sister recently about the strange things that happened to us growing up in our old house, and the memories still give me chills. One of the stories she brought up happened when she was around 8 years old. Back then, she always slept with this favorite baby doll tucked right beside her. She had this old metal bed with a rounded headboard, the kind with a narrow curved bar across the top. It was so thin and awkward that you could barely balance anything on it. Well, one night she woke up and noticed the doll wasn't lying next to her where she had left it. Instead, it was perched right on top of that curved headboard, just sitting there like someone had carefully placed it. She got so scared she came straight into the living room and asked if any of us had done it. But nobody had touched that doll. My own experience happened a few years later when I was about 15. I was standing alone in my room with my back near the closet, not really doing anything, when I suddenly heard my name, Mara, spoken right into my left ear with this sharp urgency. I could actually feel what seemed like breath against my skin. It was so close that I was sure someone was standing directly behind me. I spun around, fully expecting to see my sister messing with me. But there was nobody there. Just the dark closet, half open, staring back at me. I searched the room, checked the closet, even looked around for one of my siblings thinking it had to be some kind of prank. Then I rushed into my sister's room, and she was just sitting there on her bed, totally confused about why I was panicking. After that closet door felt different. Before then, it had never really bothered me. But once I heard my name like that, I couldn't look at it the same way again. Still, for some reason, I didn't start closing it at night. I slept on the side of the bed that faced it directly. Then one night, I woke up staring at the ceiling. Right away, I knew something was wrong. My whole body felt pinned down. My arms were at my sides, but I couldn't move them, couldn't move anything. It was my first time ever experiencing sleep paralysis, though I didn't understand that in the moment. I was terrified. And then it got worse. I started to feel myself rising. I know how unbelievable that sounds, but it honestly felt like my body was floating upward toward the ceiling. My vision got closer and closer to it, and I could feel this awful pressure, like I was trapped inside my own body and something else had taken control. I was trying so hard to move, to snap out of it, but I couldn't. I stopped when my face felt just inches from the ceiling. I remember silently begging over and over for whatever was happening to just let me go and put me back down. After what felt like forever, probably only a few seconds, I slowly started lowering back toward the bed. But before I fully settled, I looked ahead toward the closet, and there was this tall, shadowy figure, halfway visible behind the closet door, just watching me. The second I noticed it, I felt myself being pulled in that direction. That was the part that really broke me. I was fighting as hard as I could to move, to wake up, to do anything. And just as I felt like my feet were getting close to the closet, I finally jolted awake. At one point, when I was younger, some paranormal investigation group even came to our house. They said they picked up on the presence of an older man. Now, I don't know what to make of that. I'm not someone who believes every spooky story without question, and I usually look for a rational explanation first. But those experiences, I still can't explain them. And honestly, I'm not sure I ever will. Hey, so this happened years ago, but I still remember it like it was yesterday. It was the summer of 2015, right after school let out. Our house was loud and packed, like always. 6 kids at home, plus my cousin staying with us for the season. We lived in an old 3-bedroom farmhouse in West Virginia, surrounded by open land. The town itself already had this eerie reputation. People used to say it carried old energy, and honestly, growing up there, it was easy to believe. Around that time, we've been watching a bunch of scary movies. I think one of them was The Conjuring, maybe another paranormal movie. I can't remember exactly. One night, after my parents had an argument, my mom ended up sleeping on the couch. The next morning, she told us something strange had happened. She woke up freezing cold, which made no sense in the middle of a humid summer with no air conditioning, and the blanket she'd been using was somehow dragged halfway into the kitchen, tangled around one of the chairs. My younger sister laughed it off, but I didn't. That story got under my skin. My grandma was deeply religious, and she used to warn us that dark things could enter your life if you opened the door to them. So of course, being a teenager, my imagination took off with that. That night, all my siblings had taken over the living room floor, so I slept alone in this tiny room that used to be my grandfather's office. We had squeezed a bunk bed in there, and I usually slept on the bottom. Before I fell asleep, I remember whispering, "Grandpa, if that's you, give me some kind of sign." He had passed away years earlier, and I guess I was hoping for comfort. Nothing happened that night, but the night after that, everything changed. I woke up suddenly, and right away I knew something was wrong. My face felt burning hot, my whole body was tingling, and I couldn't move at all. Not my arms, not my legs, not even my voice. All I could do was move my eyes. I remember trying so hard to call for help, and nothing came out. I don't know how long it lasted, but it felt endless. The next morning, I told my family, and nobody believed me. They said it was probably a nightmare, or that I was half asleep and imagining things. So I tried to believe that too. But then it kept happening, night after night. At first, I didn't see anything. It was just that same terror, waking up trapped in my own body. After a couple of weeks, I got so scared of sleeping alone that I begged my sister to switch places with me. I took the top bunk, she took the bottom. That night, it happened again. And when I finally came out of it, I tried to mess with her a little. I started counting down in Spanish to scare her. But then, in the middle of it, I felt myself lose control again. My body locked up, and I couldn't stop talking or move at all. It terrified both of us. By then, I was exhausted in a way I can't really describe. Not just tired, drained, like sleep wasn't helping anymore. Like something in me was being worn down. I begged my parents to take me seriously, and the only solution they offered was to let me sleep in the living room instead. So I did. That was the first night in weeks that I woke up feeling rested. But then my grandma noticed bruises on my upper arm, clear marks like fingers had grabbed me hard. And what made it worse was that I'd fallen asleep on the couch, but woke up on the floor several feet away from it. That scared me more than anything, and from there, it got worse. Every night, I'd wake up frozen and feel pressure at the foot of the bed, like something heavy had climbed onto it. Then, little by little, I'd feel it getting closer. The mattress would shift, the springs would creak. It felt like something was moving on all fours beside me, inching its way toward my face. I never fully saw it, but I felt every bit of it. One night, I felt something drag my arm down the bed and brush my hair away from my face. And then there was this crushing weight on my chest, so heavy I could barely think. I honestly believed I was being haunted. Finally, I told my grandma everything, every detail. I expected her to dismiss me like everyone else had, but she didn't. She just listened, really listened. And then she looked at me and said she was sorry I was going through it. That night, I went to bed expecting the same nightmare. But it never came. The next morning, I woke up with sunlight in the room, calm for the first time in months. My grandma was standing at my door, and the first thing she asked was, "Did anything happen last night?" I told her no, and she said, "I prayed for you." And that was it. After all those nights, all that fear, it just stopped. Completely. I've never experienced anything like that again. I still can't explain it. Maybe it was sleep paralysis. Maybe it was something darker. I honestly don't know. But I do know how real it felt, and I know I'll never forget that summer. I need to tell you about something that's been sitting with me for a long time, because even now, I still don't fully know what to make of it. My old best friend, Jame, died in December 2024. He was 26. I believe it may have been suicide, but his family never confirmed anything, so I've been left with that uncertainty ever since. We hadn't been close for the last few years before he died. Life kind of pulled us apart, and if I'm honest, both of us were struggling with our mental health in ways that made it hard to hold on to anything, even each other. What's strange is that after he died, I had 3 dreams about him, and they didn't feel like normal dreams at all. I usually don't remember dreams properly. If I do, they're just scraps that fade by lunchtime. But these were different. I can still remember them so clearly, down to tiny details. They felt less like dreams and more like memories I somehow lived through. The first one happened in January 2025. It was short, almost stupidly simple, but that's part of why it stuck with me. I was walking through this school building that looked a lot like the one I'd worked in not long before. I turned a corner in the hallway, and there was Jame, just standing there with this oversized foam dart blaster in his hands, grinning like an idiot. He looked at me and said, "Come on, let's go terrorize some teenagers." And then he took off running down the corridor. I remember laughing and immediately following after him, and then I woke up. At the time, I didn't think much of it. I just thought maybe my brain was giving me something gentle, something familiar. One last ridiculous moment with him. The second dream was in March, and that one felt much heavier. I was sitting in what looked like some kind of waiting area, maybe in a hospital or a care facility, somewhere quiet and too clean. There were plastic chairs, pale walls, a little table between us. A staff member brought Jame out to see me, and we sat together for what felt like hours. We talked about everything. Old memories, stupid jokes, the kind of things you only share with someone who once knew you inside out. And I remember so clearly that he apologized. He told me he was sorry he left when he did. That alone would have been enough to shake me, but there was something else in that dream that really bothered me. The woman who brought him in. She was older, heavy-set, with short gray curls, and she stood on the other side of the room, just watching us. Not in a normal way either. She felt wrong, almost like she was pretending to be human rather than actually being human. Her eyes were intense, like she wasn't looking at me so much as through me, into me. I can't explain it better than that. Eventually, she said it was time for Jame to go back, and she led him away. Then I woke up. That dream stayed with me for days. Then there was the third one, in May 2025, and that's the one that really unsettled me. It started off almost sweet. I met Jame in a little bookshop. We were messing around, pulling random books off the shelves, laughing at pretentious titles and badly designed covers. It felt easy, like old times. But I barely got any time with him before someone interrupted us. A woman who worked there came over and told Jame he had to go back now, and that I had to leave too. I got angry instantly. I remember saying, "No, I'm staying." And then everything changed. At one point, she bent so far down toward me that it felt like she wasn't speaking to the version of me in the dream anymore. It felt like she was talking directly to me, the real me, outside of it. Like she was breaking through whatever wall separated the dream from waking life. I was terrified, but I still kept saying I wasn't leaving. Then she said we could play a game. If I won, I could stay. So I agreed. The game had 3 rounds. In each one, I either had to escape from something chasing me or destroy the right object before I was caught. I never actually saw what was after me, and somehow that made it worse. It felt ancient, nameless, like something I wasn't supposed to understand. In the first round, I managed to get away. In the second, I found the right object and smashed it before whatever was coming reached me. Then, while I was waiting for the third round to start, someone handed me a note. I can still picture the words on it. It said, "Nothing good will come from you winning. We're ending this now. Leave." And right after that, I was forced awake. When I woke up, I had this splitting headache that lasted the rest of the day. Nothing helped. Not painkillers, not food, not water, not going back to bed. It just sat there like the dream had followed me out. The first 2 dreams felt comforting in a strange way. Whether it was really Jame reaching out, or just my mind trying to give me some peace, I could live with that. They felt gentle, like maybe, somehow, everything was okay. But that third one didn't feel gentle at all. That one felt like I went somewhere I wasn't supposed to go. I was around 19, maybe just turned 20, and I was home by myself that morning, feeling calm and, honestly, in a pretty good mood. Earlier, I'd smoked a little weed, but nothing unusual for me. I wasn't out of it, I wasn't confused, and I knew exactly what was going on around me. Then, out of nowhere, something hit me. The only way I know how to explain it is that it felt like this powerful wave of energy moved straight through my body. Not emotional energy, not fear, not panic, but something physical. Dense, intentional. Almost like some invisible force passed through the room and right into me. The second it happened, my whole body went weak. It was like gravity suddenly got way heavier. I dropped to the floor, and I could not get myself back up. My arms felt impossibly heavy, like they weren't really mine anymore, like they were made of concrete. I remember trying to push myself up and just not being able to do it. Every little movement felt painfully slow, like the air around me had turned thick and heavy. It took everything I had just to try to move. And at the same time, I heard this sound. I still can't explain it. It wasn't exactly ringing, and it wasn't static either. It was more like this strange, layered noise, like it was coming from everywhere at once and nowhere specific. It didn't feel like a sound in the room. It felt like it was happening inside me, or maybe around me in some way I couldn't understand. The whole thing probably lasted only a minute or two, maybe a little longer, but in the moment, it felt endless. And then, just as fast as it started, it was over. The heaviness lifted. My body felt normal again. The room felt normal again. It was like someone flipped a switch and everything went back to how it had been before. But I was deeply rattled. The first person I called was my mom. I remember asking her if she was okay, because I honestly thought whatever had just happened to me must have happened everywhere. That's how huge it felt. But she had no idea what I was talking about. Later, I asked a couple of friends if they'd noticed anything strange that day, and nobody had. After a while, I stopped bringing it up. Most people either brushed it off or told me maybe I'd just gotten too high, or that it sounded psychological. But that never sat right with me, because I know how it felt. I've smoked before and after that day plenty of times, and nothing has ever come close. My mind felt clear the whole time. I wasn't spiraling. I was just suddenly overwhelmed by something that felt completely outside of me. Even now, I still don't know what it was. Back then, my mind ran everywhere trying to make sense of it. I wondered if it was something cosmic, something spiritual, some kind of atmospheric event, even something catastrophic beginning in the distance. It felt bigger than anything ordinary, bigger than anything man-made. That's the part that has stayed with me most, how unnatural and immense it felt. I've had a few other strange moments in my life too. Growing up, there were times I'd hear whispering so close to my ear, it felt like someone was standing right beside me, even when I was alone. But nothing ever affected my body the way that wave did. Nothing ever made the world feel that suddenly heavy. So I'm sharing this because I really want to know if anyone else has ever felt something like that. A sudden physical shift, like pressure or gravity changed, along with a strange sound and this intense heaviness. I still don't fully know how to explain this, and honestly, even now, I'm not sure what I believe about it. This happened years ago when I was living in a college residence hall. One night, I just could not sleep. I kept drifting off and then waking up again and again, like my body was tired, but my mind refused to settle. After a while, I gave up trying. I got out of bed and felt this strange urge to leave my room. I couldn't have told you where I was planning to go or what I thought I needed to do. I just felt pulled to step outside. So I did. The second I walked out, I ran into a guy I knew from the floor above me. His name was Ethan. He was heading back to his room for the night. We exchanged a quick hello, nothing unusual, just a normal passing moment. But right after that, the feeling that had pushed me out of my room disappeared completely. I turned around, went back inside, lay down, and fell asleep almost instantly. That's when the dream started. I was standing in this bright white space, and there was a woman there with me. She didn't speak, not once, but somehow I could feel what she was trying to communicate. Her face was full of emotion. She looked distressed, almost desperate, like she was asking me for something. I remember trying to respond, not with words exactly, but with thought. I was telling her I didn't understand, that I didn't know who she was, and that I didn't know how to help. It went on like that for a little while, this silent exchange, and then suddenly, everything went black. And then I heard it. This sharp, crashing sound, like thousands of tiny bells all ringing at once. It was so loud and so vivid that it snapped me awake. I sat straight up in bed, heart pounding, and the sound slowly faded as I looked around the room. I even checked outside the window, trying to figure out where it could have come from, but the whole campus was, and still. I was shaken, but eventually I lay back down. Then the dream came again. Same white space, same woman. She was facing me, and this time I understood a little more. She still wasn't speaking, but I could feel her fear and her sadness more clearly. What I got, more than anything, was that she didn't want to leave. She wanted to stay. Stay where, I couldn't say. I just knew that was what she was trying to express. And again, I kept trying to tell her that I didn't know what she wanted from me, that I didn't know how to do anything for her. I felt completely overwhelmed in the dream, like I was being asked something impossible. Then it all went dark again. The bells came back just as violently as before, and once again, they woke me up. Same panic, same fading echo. By then, I was seriously unsettled. I'd had restless nights before, and weird dreams too, but usually I'd forget them by morning. I told myself this had to be some kind of stress dream, something brought on by exhaustion, and I tried to go back to sleep one more time. The third time was different. There was no white room now, no light at all, just darkness. The woman was gone. I remember looking around in the dream, almost calling out for her, though there was no sound. But she wasn't there. And somehow I knew, deep down, that she was truly gone. Then the bells rang again. Only this time, when I woke up, I wasn't confused. I had one clear thought, immediate and certain. Ethan's mother had died, and the woman in my dream had been her. That thought hit me so hard that I grabbed something and wrote it down right away. I didn't want to risk forgetting it in the morning, though part of me already knew there was no chance I was going to forget something that intense. The next day, I found out Ethan had left during the night and driven several hours home because his mother had passed away in her sleep. And that's the part that has stayed with me all these years. What shook me wasn't just the dream itself. It was waking up to find out that the one thing I couldn't explain had turned out to be true. I've always been a skeptical person. I still am, honestly. So I'm not telling this story because I think I have some neat answer for what happened. I don't. I still go back and forth in my mind about it. All I know is that it happened, and I've never forgotten it. So, there's this tiny little town up in far northern Montana, tucked along a river not too far from Glacier National Park and pretty close to the Canadian border, where I've had a couple of experiences I still can't really make sense of. My boyfriend Ryan and I go up there whenever we can in the summer. We're both really into fly fishing and rafting, and honestly, it's one of our favorite places in the world. It's unbelievably beautiful. The town itself is barely more than a few buildings. There's a bar with live music sometimes, a little general store, and not much else. No cell signal, no internet, and you have to take this long, dusty back road to get in. Huge mountains, a fast-moving river, and this strange feeling like you've stepped slightly outside normal life. We always laugh and say the place feels like some kind of portal. The first strange thing happened maybe 5 years ago. Ryan and I were there with a few friends, staying in this cabin that belonged to a friend's uncle. There were a couple of other cabins scattered nearby, but it still felt pretty isolated. That night we'd all been outside for hours, grilling, drinking a little, sitting around the fire, and by around midnight, everyone else had gone in to sleep. Ryan and I stayed outside a little longer because we wanted to grab something from the truck, and then we just ended up sitting in the back of it, talking and looking up at the stars. And that's when we heard it. Just one loud clap. It came from somewhere behind us, out in the dark. Not super close, but not far either. A few seconds later, there was another one. Just one again, but this time off to our right. Then another from the left. They weren't random. They weren't close together like branches snapping or people messing around. Each one was spaced out, deliberate, and every single one came from a different direction. Then another clap came from behind us again, only this time it was closer. I remember both of us going completely still. We didn't even really look at each other at first. We were just listening. Then there was another clap, and somewhere nearby a bunch of dogs started barking. That sound made it worse somehow, because it confirmed we weren't imagining it. Something was moving around out there, or at least, something was making itself known. We still weren't talking. We were just frozen. Then came one more clap, so close it felt like it was practically on top of us. And without saying a word, both of us jumped down and ran for the cabin. I mean full sprint. Pure panic. Not just being startled, that deep, instinctive fear where your whole body is telling you to get inside now. We got through the cabin door, slammed it shut, and almost immediately heard one last clap from the trees right outside. Maybe 15, 20 feet away. I still get chills thinking about that. Then the second thing happened last summer. We were back in the same area, but this time camping maybe 10 miles farther down the road at this quieter riverside spot where we'd been floating during the day. There were probably 6 or 7 of us total, spread out in a few tents. Not far from us, there was a man staying in a camper van. He seemed nice, and we chatted with him for a bit earlier in the evening. At one point, he mentioned he'd served in the military. I think he said the Air Force. At first, I thought it was just a shooting star. But then it stopped. It literally stopped. And then it got brighter, like suddenly, sharply brighter. Flashed, hovered there for a second, and then shot straight upward at this unbelievable speed and disappeared. The second it happened, people all over our campsite started yelling, "Did you guys see that?" So I knew right away it wasn't just me. The guy in the camper van came over too, visibly shaken, saying he'd seen it clearly. And then he told us that wasn't even the first time. He said he'd seen the same kind of thing at that exact campsite twice before. That honestly made the whole thing hit even harder, because he didn't come across like someone trying to tell a spooky story. He looked genuinely rattled. Later on, we saw Starlink satellites crossing overhead, and those were easy to recognize. Totally different. Straight path, steady movement, nothing weird about them. Whatever we saw earlier was not that. Then maybe a few weeks later, Ryan and I were back in town at the bar listening to live music. We got to talking with one of the musicians between sets, just casually chatting about the area. At some point, the campground came up, and we still hadn't told him anything about what we'd experienced. And out of nowhere, he goes, "That campground's gorgeous, but every time I stay there, I see UFOs." Ryan and I just stared at him. We also have a friend who works in the glacier area, and they've mentioned seeing, or hearing reports of, unmarked government vehicles heading out that way more than once, which only adds to the weirdness. I don't know what any of it means. I really don't. Maybe there are explanations for all of it, but I can tell you this. Both experiences felt real, and they've stayed with me. We're planning to go back again in July, and I have a feeling I'll be paying very close attention the whole time. You know, my grandpa Louise passed away in 2021, and I was 21 then. We were incredibly close. I always joked that I was probably his favorite grandkid, and honestly, I think there was some truth to that. He spent most of his life driving a cab, working non-stop, making sure everyone at home had what they needed. Food on the table, bills paid, all of it. He had diabetes, but he was the kind of person who always put himself last, and by late 2020, his health had really started getting worse. I remember one time I told him I made amazing smoky pinto beans, and he laughed and said, "So, when are you making me some?" I told him I would, but I kept putting it off. Then one afternoon in early January, he showed up at our house with my grandma. I remember thinking it was kind of random. My grandma smiled and said, "Your grandpa came because you promised him those beans and never made them." So, of course, I went straight to the kitchen and made them for him. By then, he was already in a wheelchair and he hardly said much. But he sat there quietly, ate, and just looked calm, peaceful. That same evening, he ended up back in the hospital. He'd already been going in and out for weeks because his lungs kept filling with fluid. It was like every time we thought he might stabilize, something else happened. A few nights later, I had this dream that I still remember so clearly. In the dream, I was standing in his room, and then he walked in. Just completely fine. No wheelchair, no struggle, no weakness. He looked like himself again. I asked him, "You feeling better?" And he smiled and said, "Yeah, I'm ready to get back to work." Then he said, "Come on, let's go pick up your grandma and get groceries." And that hit me, because that was something we used to do together all the time when I was little. We'd ride with him, pick up my grandma, and go shopping like it was the most normal thing in the world. So in the dream, we got into his cab and started driving. We were on the way, just like old times. Then suddenly my phone started ringing. He looked at me and asked, "Who is it?" I checked and said, "It's Mom." I remember not wanting to answer it, but he told me, "Go ahead, it might be important." So I picked up the phone, and right then I woke up. My phone was actually ringing. It really was my mom. She told me, "They're sending your grandpa home. The doctor said there's nothing more they can do. He may only have a few days left." I just sat there frozen. I didn't even know what to say. He passed away about a week later. In those last days, he barely spoke. He was mostly asleep, confused, and didn't really recognize people anymore. And I never went to see him again after that dream. Not because I didn't love him. It was the opposite, really. I just wanted to hold on to that last version of him, walking, smiling, ready to work, taking one more ride with me. I couldn't bear to replace that with the sight of him lying there, fading away. I still don't know what that dream really was. Maybe it was just my mind trying to prepare me. Or maybe it was his way of saying goodbye. Either way, I've carried it with me ever since, and I know I always will. I've never really stopped thinking about this. And maybe saying it out loud now is the only reason I can still carry it. I was 16 back then, and I was living in a small town near Coburg in Germany. One cold Saturday night, my best friend Lena and I were walking back to my parents' apartment. It had to be around 2 in the morning. We didn't have enough money for a taxi, so we were making our way up this long, dark hill on foot. It was steep enough to make your legs ache, and at that hour, the whole street felt deserted. As we were walking, we heard this faint sound, like someone struggling to breathe. Across the street, in front of an apartment building, there was a big decorative stone on the lawn. And leaning against it was an elderly man, maybe in his late 70s, maybe older. Even in the dim light, we could see he was in bad shape. He was bent forward, clutching his chest, breathing hard. Of course, we ran over. We asked him if he was all right, and he told us, very quietly, that he thought he might have had a heart attack. I remember immediately telling him I was going to call an ambulance, but he became strangely urgent and begged me not to. He kept saying he was already feeling better, that he lived just nearby, and that he only needed a few minutes before he could make it home on his own. So we stayed with him. I remember studying him carefully, trying to figure out whether he'd been drinking or whether something else was wrong. But he didn't seem drunk or confused. He actually seemed calm, clear, just weak. We sat with him there in the dark for a few minutes, making small talk, trying to keep him company until he recovered. Then, after maybe 5 minutes or so, he smiled and said he felt strong enough to go. We said goodbye, wished him well, and continued up the hill. We hadn't gone very far when we heard something behind us. We turned around, and I can still feel what happened in my body when I saw him. It was the same man. He was standing there behind us in the road, smiling gently, as if nothing at all had happened. And that's what made it so wrong. Lena and I were out of breath from climbing that steep hill, but somehow he was just there. No sign of strain, no sound of footsteps, just suddenly there. He looked at us and said he wanted to thank us for our kindness. He said he wished us long lives, full of love and happiness. I remember glancing at Lena, and the look on her face chilled me. She looked exactly the way I felt, terrified, confused, frozen. I told him again that he should go home and rest, and he said he would, but that he couldn't leave without telling us how grateful he was. Then he called us angels. The thing is, I knew something was wrong the moment he said that. He had told us earlier that he lived just around the corner from the building where we found him. But by then, we had already walked far enough that the building was well behind us. There was no way he should have been there. No way he could have caught up to us like that. Still, we smiled politely, thanked him, and kept walking. The rest of the way, Lena kept whispering something under her breath. I was so scared I didn't even ask what she was saying. I just wanted to get to my parents' apartment and be inside with the door locked. When we finally got there, she looked at me and burst into tears. She said, "You have to understand, that wasn't a real person." And the second she said it, I started crying too, because I had felt the exact same thing. I hadn't wanted to say it. I hadn't wanted to make it real. But deep down, I knew. Whatever we had spoken to that night, whatever had smiled at us in the road, it did not feel human. We went to bed without saying much more. She's gone now. She died years ago in a car accident, along with her 2 little girls. And somehow, that night has stayed with me all this time. I still think about it more often than I can explain. I don't know what we saw. I only know that both of us felt it. Both of us knew, without saying it, that something about him wasn't right. And after all these years, I still hear that voice in my mind, still see that smile in the dark, and I still ask myself the same question. Who or what was he? I was around 9 when this happened, back in 2016, not long after my dad died. That year really broke something open in me. I was living with my mom and my stepdad in a small apartment, and I had my own room. I slept in a loft bed with this little fabric cover over it, almost like a hideout. So once I was up there, it felt like I was tucked away in my own private world. I also had this small, star-shaped nightlight beside my bed. It gave off this soft, bluish glow that always helped me drift off. One night, sometime around midnight, I woke up suddenly with this strong feeling that someone was watching me. You know that feeling when you wake up and instantly know something is different? That's exactly what it felt like. So I pushed myself up a little and looked through the opening in the cover around my bed. At the far end of the room, I saw this dark figure standing there. It looked like a person, but not fully. It was wearing what seemed like a long, dark coat and a brimmed hat. I couldn't make out any face or features at all. It was just this deep black shape, like all I could really see was the outline. I stared at it for what felt like forever, though it was probably less than a minute. And then I noticed it was coming closer. Not walking, not stepping, just gliding toward me. And the strangest part is, I didn't feel terrified. I know that sounds unbelievable, but I didn't feel panic. I didn't scream. I didn't hide. Instead, I climbed down from my bed, knelt on the floor, and pulled out a box of toy cars from under the bed. Somehow, in that moment, it felt completely natural, like I was with someone I already knew. We played for a little while, quietly, and then I climbed back up into bed and fell asleep. What stayed with me most was how safe it felt. Not scary, not threatening, just familiar. The next morning, I told my mom everything. At first, she thought maybe I'd had a vivid dream, but I think she saw something in my face that made her stop dismissing it. I remember still feeling unsettled, even though the presence itself had felt comforting. She told me she believed it might have been my dad visiting me, like a spirit watching over me. For a long time, I tried to hold on to that explanation, but I don't really believe that anymore. After that night, there was this period when strange things kept happening to me. Sometimes I would sit alone in the dark, squeeze my eyes shut, and suddenly everything would go completely silent. It felt like I was no longer seeing through my own eyes. It was more like I was moving through the apartment from someone else's point of view, almost floating from room to room. It only happened in the months after I saw that figure. Eventually, it stopped. I can't do it anymore, and honestly, I have no desire to try. Then, just a couple of weeks ago, I was sitting in my room scrolling through TikTok, half paying attention, when a video stopped me cold. Someone was describing a shadow entity in exact detail. The dark coat, the hat, the completely black body. Even the way it moved matched what I had seen that night. They called it the Hat Man. The second I heard that name, I got chills all over my body. Because after all these years, I realized maybe that night wasn't just some childhood dream. And maybe whatever visited me in that room had a name all along. I need to tell you about something that happened a few years ago, because even now, I still can't fully explain it. It started sometime in late summer, maybe around August. For weeks, I kept smelling this really specific scent of damp soil, like the ground after rain. The strange thing was, it would happen no matter where I was. Different places, different times of day, no clear reason. Some days it was so strong it stopped me in my tracks, and other days it was just faint enough to make me wonder if I'd imagined it. But it kept happening, almost every day, for about a month. Then one night, I had this dream that felt way too vivid to be random. I was on a boat in the middle of the night, out on this dark but peaceful water. My mother was there, and my younger sister too, but in the dream, my sister wasn't the age she really was then. She was much younger, almost like a little child again. There were other people around us, but I didn't know them. At first, everything felt calm. Then, suddenly, everything turned violent. The boat was under attack, explosions everywhere, total panic. My sister, her name is Liana, was crying hysterically, and I grabbed her and held her as tightly as I could. I remember looking around desperately for my mother, but she was gone. I couldn't find her anywhere. In the middle of all that fear, I called my father and told him I couldn't find her. Honestly, I probably would have brushed the dream off and forgotten about it. But later that very same day, something happened that made it impossible to ignore. My mother was coming home from work when she got into a terrible car accident. The vehicle rolled several times. It easily could have killed her. Somehow, unbelievably, she survived with only minor injuries, just bruises and a few cuts. What shook me most was how closely everything that happened afterward matched the dream. A friend was the one who called and told me about the crash. I immediately phoned my sister. She completely fell apart, started crying, and ran all the way to my house. When she got there, she asked me to hold her, which was so out of character for her that it stopped me cold. It was almost exactly what I had seen in the dream. And then, right after that, I called my father to tell him what had happened so he could go to the accident scene, just like I had in the dream. And after that day, the smell disappeared. For a long time, I didn't notice it again. But eventually, it came back. Only now, it seemed to happen shortly before something awful would occur. I'd catch that same earthy scent around certain people, and then within days, some kind of accident, loss, or tragedy would touch their lives. It started to feel like a warning I never asked for. The stronger the smell was, the more serious the event seemed to be. When it was lighter, whatever followed was usually less severe. I should also say this because it matters. During that period of my life, I was struggling with pretty intense anxiety and panic attacks. And oddly enough, as I slowly began healing and getting better, the scent became less frequent. Over time, it faded completely. I still don't know what to make of any of it. Maybe it was stress. Maybe my mind was connecting things in a way I couldn't understand. Or maybe it was something else entirely. But it felt real when I was living through it, and I've never forgotten it. So, Mason and I moved into this old house about 3 weeks ago, and we've been fixing it up bit by bit. From the moment we got the keys, the place felt strange in a very specific way. Not scary exactly, just lived in. The previous owners had left behind loads of furniture, old bedding, drawers, chairs, even a bed in the spare room. But all their personal little things were gone. No photos, no ornaments, nothing small and meaningful. It honestly felt like we'd stepped into someone else's life halfway through. The house itself was built sometime in the 1950s, and the family who lived here bought it decades ago and raised their children here. We were told the wife had developed dementia before she passed away, and her husband now lives in a care home. So there's already a lot of history in the walls, if that makes sense. At first, though, everything felt completely fine. The first week was peaceful. Neither of us felt uneasy. There was no weird energy, no creepy moments, nothing like that. Then a few nights ago, Mason went up into the loft and found a bunch of old toy boxes tucked away. Proper vintage stuff, some of it from the 1960s, and when we started looking them up, we realized a few pieces were actually worth a decent amount of money. We got really excited because, honestly, it felt like this lucky little surprise that could help pay for our new bathroom. We sat there for hours going through everything, checking values, talking about what we might do with them. By the time we packed them away and put them in a cupboard in our bedroom, it was pretty late. That night, just after I'd fallen asleep, Mason was still awake in the spare room sorting through some boxes when he suddenly heard the extractor fan switch on in the kitchen downstairs. He went down to check it, and for some reason used his phone torch instead of turning the light on. The second he pointed the light at it, the fan stopped. Then when he stepped closer, it started up again. It's one of those old extractor fans with a dial from 0 to 3, and when he checked it, the switch was sitting on number 2. He unplugged it, came back upstairs, and not long after that, he heard heavy banging on the stairs. That sound really stood out because we'd just pulled the carpet off the staircase the day before, so now every step is loud and creaky. There's no mistaking that noise. He got into bed after that, but then he started hearing plates and cutlery clattering in the kitchen. After that came this steady tapping sound, moving from room to room downstairs. He said it sounded exactly like someone walking with a cane. Not random knocking, not pipes, not the heating, but something rhythmic, deliberate. He stayed awake listening to it until the early morning, and he told me that when I finally woke up around dawn, it stopped almost immediately. That morning, I rang my dad, because he's a vicar, and I told him everything. I asked if he'd come bless the house. He came over that evening, and we walked through every room together. We lit candles, said prayers, asked anything unsettled in the house to leave, all of that. It actually made me feel better at the time. Like maybe we were taking back control a bit. The next evening, we went to bed feeling so much better, almost proud of ourselves for sorting it. But then, around midnight, Mason woke up to this awful noise downstairs. He said it sounded like somebody had hurled an object onto a cluttered table, like a crash that lasted several seconds. Then the tapping started again. It went on for about 10 minutes. Then it happened again around 1 in the morning for another few minutes. What's bothering us most is that it only happens late, once it's fully dark. During the day, the house feels calm, peaceful even. Nothing feels off. But after about 10 at night, the whole atmosphere changes. And before anyone says it's pipes, Mason is a plumber and heating engineer, so he knows those sounds inside out. The heating is off when this happens, no taps are running, and he's certain it isn't anything mechanical. That's part of why this has got under our skin so badly. If there were a practical explanation, I think we'd both feel a lot better. The only thing that gives me even a tiny bit of comfort is our cat. He doesn't seem upset at all. He's completely relaxed. But then again, he's also ridiculously friendly and not exactly the sharpest creature alive, so I'm not sure he'd be much help as a warning system. What we keep coming back to is the timing. All of this started right after those old toys were brought down from the loft. That's the part we can't ignore. We've been wondering whether somehow it's connected to them, or maybe to the old furniture and belongings that are still in the house. There's still the previous owner's armchair, table and chairs, and that spare bed here for now because we're waiting on a permit before we can clear everything out. It's just hard, because this is our first home together. We were so excited to start this chapter, to make this place our own, and now instead of enjoying it, we're lying awake listening for footsteps and tapping in the dark. We feel a bit lost, honestly. We've prayed, had the house blessed, burned incense, spoken out loud, asked whatever it is to leave, and we still don't know what else to do.